Chapter 1972. Qin Hao stood on the sword with his hands behind his back and looked from afar. He saw a huge oval-shaped sphere in front of him. It was surrounded by clouds and extremely dense spirit qi. The Kunlun continent. The illusion lord pointed at the oval-shaped sphere and said excitedly. In the boundless chaos, every great world had a different landmass, with different shapes and sizes. Some were long, some were ring-shaped, and some were broken. Many small landmasses were connected together, forming a vast world. There were not many places like the Kunlun continent, which was similar to a sphere that rotated on its own. Coincidentally, everyone remembered that when they left the Divine Wilderness continent and looked back, the Divine Wilderness plain was also a sphere. Although it was much smaller than Kunlun, it was rounder. It was hazy with a layer of azure blue, and its appearance was incomparably smooth. The entire Kunlun plain had a layer of orange halo. The untainted land is so magical, Xiao Han exclaimed in admiration. In the boundless starry sky, there were countless strange versions of continents and spheres. The number of cultivators in each plane was also immeasurable. He wondered what kind of great power had given birth to the Chaos World. Qin Hao and the others continued to fly forward on their swords. In the void, they often saw other cultivators like them, flying past on dazzling divine artifacts toward the Kunlun continent. It was impossible to travel through the untainted land with the Emperor's Tao. Only heavenly Wheel Realm cultivators could release their divine power or rely on divine artifacts. After entering the Divine Wilderness world, the closer they got to the Kunlun continent, the more cultivators they encountered. Among them, there were many that made Qin Hao feel powerful. The Kunlun Sea Grand Meeting was held once every 1,000 years. This time, it had also attracted countless cultivators from different planes. Other than a few forces that had received special invitations, most cultivators would come voluntarily to participate in this once-in-a-lifetime event. Be careful, Qin Hao said in a deep voice. His divine will flew on his sword and carried everyone into the Kunlun heavenly path. Buzz! There was a loud roar in everyone's ears and their minds shook. At the same time, they felt a heavenly power pressing down on them. Their divine souls and Tao wills weakened. Every time they entered a heavenly path, the cultivators outside would be suppressed by the plane. This was the rule of the untainted land. But soon, Wuk, Xiaohan, and even Kuangtang began to adapt to the aura of the Kunlun heavenly path. The Divine Wilderness world was a powerful world that was close to perfection. It was not inferior to the Great Tao Sword. Furthermore, the aura of the Kunlun Heavenly Way was somewhat similar to that of the Divine Wilderness, causing everyone to feel a sense of familiarity. They felt more and more comfortable, far better than in the East Imperial Realm. And the pressure of Heavenly Path. But, and Qin, Senior, your complexion looks terrible. And the pressure of the Kunlun heavenly path is so strong. Old man's space divine power has been weakened by at least 40%. The illusion sovereign's face was pale, and his breathing was much faster than normal people. If he encountered an opponent of the same level, especially a heavenly wheel realm cultivator in the Kunlun plane, he would not be able to last more than 3 rounds. After all, his space divine power had been weakened by 40%. My feeling is different from Senior's. Wuk asked in bewilderment. Was it that exaggerated? Why was his sword will as stable as usual? It was probably not even weakened by half. 40% of the illusion sovereign's divine power was suppressed. This place is much more comfortable than the illusion sovereign's place. Kuangtang also felt very uncomfortable. He sat on the great void sword and looked around. He was energetic and full of energy. He gave people the feeling that he was not weak but strong. The illusion sovereign was stunned. He felt that he had to find time to discuss with Qin Hao and see if he could send him back to the Divine Wilderness to get the approval of the heavenly path. In this way, His body would be filled with the power of the original realm, and it would be easier for him to integrate with the other heavenly paths. Kunlun's heavenly path does not have attributes. The heavenly wheel in Qin Hao's body quietly operated, and his divine sense gradually penetrated the Kunlun's heavenly path. He was slightly shocked. So that was it. No wonder they felt a sense of familiarity. The Kunlun plane did not have attributes, but it could accommodate thousands of laws and encompass everything. Although it was not as good as the heavenly path of the divine wilderness, this wonderful environment was obviously much better than a plane filled with a single attribute. No wonder this heavenly path was not controlled by a heavenly wheel realm cultivator. It was as difficult as ascending to heaven for a heavenly wheel realm cultivator who was not from the original realm to accommodate thousands of attributes in Kunlun. Thinking of this, Qin Hao's heart trembled. Could it be that this was fate? Kunlun's situation was very similar to the second divine wilderness. Although there was a heavenly wheel, it was not recognized by the heavenly path. It was as if it was waiting for someone. Qin Hao felt that it was waiting for him. "Kid, why don't we find a chance?" The illusion reverend did not finish his words. In the distance there was a huge roar mixed with panicked screams. A castle-like divine ritual implement was thrown out of black smoke and fell under the Kunlun's heavenly path. Countless figures were thrown into the sky, and no one knew if the owner was safe. What a group of poor unlucky people! Oh, what did Senior say? Qin Hao looked at the illusion reverend. "Nothing, I'll go to the Kunlun Sea first." The illusion reverend looked sympathetically at the collapsed divine throne. Kunlun was too dangerous, and it was better to stay with Qin Hao. The great void sword flew through the void, and finally, they landed on the Kunlun continent. They did not need to ask anyone, and just followed the crowd in the direction of the gathering. After all, they were all here to participate in the Millennium event of the Kunlun Sea. Qin Hao kept his great void divine sword and hid his cultivation base out of habit. Qin Hao and the rest flew slowly above the cities. The people in the cities occasionally looked up and saw the experts passing by. Their hearts were filled with endless worship. No matter which direction, the strength was always in the shape of a pyramid. The stronger the group, the fewer the number. It was the same in the divine wilderness, the phantom continent and Kunlun. For the people in the cities, looking at the countless experts from the outside world, how could they not want to be one of them? They wanted to step out of Kunlun one day and go to other planes to enjoy the scenery. "Everyone, please stop. I see that this young master's silver hair is elegant, and he has a dignified appearance. He has a beautiful woman accompanying him, guards by his side, and an old servant of the celestial wheel realm serving him. He must be a descendant of some god." At this moment, an old man with a bloated figure and unbuttoned clothes that revealed his large belly sat upright on an enormous flying magic artifact, a palm leaf fan. He held a wine gourd in his hand as he blocked Qin Hao's path, and his entire body emitted a dense smell of wine. "I'm not a god, and they're not my guards or servants. May I ask what's the matter?" Qin Hao stopped and asked. Xiao Han and Wuk were fine, but the illusion elder's face was slightly impatient. How did he become an old servant for no reason? Did he look like one? No need to pretend. Nothing can escape the eyes of the old man. I presume that the god is here to participate in the Kunlun Sea gathering. The old man picked up the wine gourd and took a sip, exuding a sense of straightforwardness. "I'm here to participate in the Kunlun Sea gathering," Qin Hao said. He was too lazy to explain the identity of Wuk and the illusion elder to others. "Then the god is great. We can't miss the old man. The god and I are fated to meet, and we hit it off at first sight. God, look here." The old man's eyes were filled with vigor. His hand reached behind his back, and several ancient books appeared in front of Qin Hao. Kunlun Continent's Heavenly Chakra Realm Experts, Kunlun Sea Female Disciples, Kunlun Sea Masters Hobbies, Gathering of Experts. This The illusion elder's eyes were wide open. How about it? Pick one. If you like them all, then you can buy them all. It's cheap, 1 book for 1 divine weapon. The old man laughed sinisterly. I'm sorry, but we don't need it, Xiao Han said coldly. This old man didn't look like a good person. Selling the information of the Kunlun continent's experts was one thing, but he also sold the portraits of the Kunlun C-sex female disciples. It seemed like he was purposely tempting people to commit crimes. 1 book for 1 divine weapon, why don't you go rob them? Kuang Teng shouted. He felt that he was crazy enough, but the people of Kunlun continent were even crazier. You can keep it and sell it to others. We really don't need it. Goodbye. Qin Hao looked at Xiao Han silently. He didn't have the intention to buy it. Moreover, it was indeed too expensive. He only had 1 divine weapon, and he couldn't use the Great Void Sword to exchange for a broken book. Be careful of this person. A shout came from afar. Just as Qin Hao and the others were about to leave, a group of people chased after the old bookseller from behind. They were aggressive, and the leader was a middle-aged man. He had a dignified look on his face. He landed in front of the old bookseller and shouted, "Give me back my divine weapon!" The old man stopped smiling and his face suddenly turned cold. When did I take your divine weapon? You must have mistaken me for someone else. You bastard! The dignified middle-aged man was so angry that he cursed. This old man had obviously taken his divine weapon, but he still didn't admit it. Hee, looking at your decent appearance, your background and conditions must be much better than old man's. You actually dare to frame me. What a sanctimonious person! The old man said with disdain. He drank a mouthful of wine and didn't panic at all when facing the people that surrounded him. Dao friends, this thief stole my father's divine weapon. He approached you guys with the intention of stealing it. Please help my father to take him down. A delicate and pretty girl with an excellent figure, who looked like she came from a famous family, pleaded to Qin Hao. The strength of the bookseller was extraordinary, but the illusion elder beside Qin Hao was emitting the aura of a heavenly wheel expert. Don't be nosy. The illusion reverend's face didn't change as he secretly transmitted a message to Qin Hao. It didn't matter if what the girl said was true or false. To be able to steal a divine weapon from someone, the old man's strength must be very strong. Qin Hao naturally understood. They were just passing by and didn't witness the whole thing. How could they distinguish right from wrong? This was Kunlun continent. Even if something happened, it should be the sect of Kunlun that came forward. They didn't need to meddle in other people's business. I beg you guys to help us. The girl approached Qin Hao. She could see that Qin Hao was the core of this group, and the illusion reverend should be the old servant. We need to hurry, Qin Hao replied indifferently. He led the group to bypass the 2 sides and continued to advance towards the Kunlun Sea. No need to beg others. Old thief, die. The dignified middle-aged man's aura suddenly erupted, and a magnificent heaven wheel radiance bloomed, covering his 4 limbs. He raised his palm and slapped at the old man. Thunder God force spewed out from his palm. You don't know the difference between life and death. The old man's eyes flashed with a fierce light. He threw away the book in his hand and clenched his hand into a fist. With a terrifying roar, he smashed the majestic middle-aged man's divine power of thunder into nothingness. This punch directly killed him. Not only did it shatter his head, but the radiance of law particles also shattered the majestic middle-aged man's divine wheel, causing his divine soul to vanish. Father! The girl cried. The group of family guards who followed her were shocked. The patriarch of the Heaven Wheel family was killed by a single punch. You delivered yourself to me. If this old man doesn't break your body, I won't live up to my name. Ha ha ha! The fat old man made a grabbing motion, and the girl was involuntarily sucked over. Then, he carried the struggling girl and drove the palm leaf fan away, leaving behind a terrifying shadow. Chapter 1973. A heavenly wheel expert had been killed in an instant. The scene was dead silent, and the hearts of countless people trembled wildly. This scene had a particularly strong impact on Showuk and the others. The dignified middle-aged man had reached the 4th level of the Emperor realm, and was at the 9th level of the Law-Gathering realm. In the Divine Wilderness continent, other than Qin Hao and the Sunset Battle God, he could be considered the 3rd most powerful figure. Even the Sunset Battle God might not be able to defeat him. The Fat Elder had killed this person as easily as slaughtering a chicken. This made Wuk and the others feel a huge difference in their hearts. Since when had the high and mighty heavenly wheel experts become as weak as ants? This feeling was very contradictory and uncomfortable. Qin Hao looked in the direction where the Fat Elder had disappeared. There were indeed many experts in the outside world of the Divine Wilderness. The dignified middle-aged heavenly wheel expert was indeed a little weak, but seeing him being killed still made Qin Hao's heart ripple. "Are we really not going to save her?" Xiao Han revealed a pained expression. The girl was really pitiful. She had witnessed her father being killed, and even her reputation was going to be ruined in the hands of her father's killer. This was a fate worse than death. Save Misty Rain Red Dust. It's too late. Qin Hao sighed. The Fat Elder's cultivation was not bad. He could easily crush a small heavenly wheel, which was at least a saint-level heavenly wheel. Moreover, he also noticed that the old man was not suppressed by the Kunlun heavenly way. When he attacked, the power of his fist overlapped with 2 kinds of divine power. A heavenly wheel expert controlled 2 kinds of divine power and was also a heavenly wheel expert of the Kunlun plane. Even if Qin Hao's heavenly wheel was perfect, he could not stop him without using all his strength. This continent was too chaotic. If they exposed their strength too much, it would inevitably attract trouble. As long as Qin Hao released the perfect heavenly wheel divine light, it would definitely alarm many experts. That would not be good for them. "Let's go," Phantom Zun said. The cultivation world had always been like this. Even the experts of the heavenly way, who were above the masses, would still be sad when facing a stronger opponent. The group of people left. Xiao Han glanced in the direction where the girl had been taken, and his heart was filled with worry. Because of the Kunlun Oceanic event, a large number of powerful cultivators had been attracted to the Kunlun continent. Fortunately, Qin Hao's cultivation was strong enough. Otherwise, the next person to be taken away might be her. If something happened in such a place, no one would be able to find the culprit. Even the background of the culprit was unknown. Under the appearance of a bustling event, there were actually many dangers. The Kunlun Sea was a sect, and it was also a sea territory on the mainland. It was shrouded in an incomparably dense spiritual energy, and there were countless floating immortal islands. It was like a fairyland in a dream. Qin Hao and the others advanced through the air. They followed the crowd and gradually arrived at the periphery of the Kunlun Sea's sections. Looking from the sky, the boundless sea surface emitted spiritual light that was like a huge array formation that circulated the heavenly Tao's spiritual energy. According to rumors, it was personally set up by Supreme Sovereign Zihua. The Kunlun Sea's terrain was a bit like the phoenix flower of the Divine Wilderness East Continent. The scenery was magnificent, and the islands were bustling. However, compared to the phoenix flower, the Kunlun Sea was even more vast and majestic. In the void, cultivators constantly passed by Qin Hao and the others, landing on the islands below. There were sage-like elders, enchanting beauties, majestic and domineering kings, handsome youths in snow-white robes. In addition, there were Taoist priests, Taoist monks, Taoist nuns, and all kinds of other cultivators. There were even demons with dragon heads, human bodies, and a shining golden tail behind them. Every time the Kunlun Sea opens, powerful cultivators from various planes will gather here. There are all kinds of cultivators, righteous sects, evil sects, and even the little sky wheel demon god will participate. The illusion sovereign warned Wuk and crazed Tang, so, don't cause trouble here. Okay. Wuk nodded. Gulp. Crazed Tang swallowed a mouthful of saliva. After witnessing a sky wheel expert being killed, no matter how crazy crazed Tang was, he became much more obedient at this moment. This was not the divine wilderness. In the divine wilderness, every one of them was a figure that stood at the pinnacle of martial arts. But here, any random person or faction that passed by them could be as powerful and ferocious as the Fat Elder. At this moment, Qin Hao looked at a small island below. There were pavilions on the island, and there was an endless stream of cultivators on the streets. It was a grand occasion. Moreover, in almost every pavilion, there were stalls set up, selling all kinds of things. When Qin Hao released his divine sense, not only did his heartstrings tremble, the weakest of those stalls were Nirvana realm cultivators. Most of them had condensed the power of laws. There were almost no existences below Nirvana realm. Every place has its own way of survival. If their cultivation is too low, they definitely won't dare to occupy a pavilion and sell treasures. Huan Zun had experienced many things, such as setting up a public stall on the island. If the seller's cultivation was too low, once they were targeted, they would basically have no ability to protect themselves. Therefore, the owner of each pavilion must have some ability. Does the Kunlun Si not care? Qin Hao asked. I'm not sure. Perhaps this is just a way for rogue cultivators to exchange items. The Kunlun continent definitely has a professional auction house. If a treasure appears, the news will be released in advance, allowing people who need it to compete. As for the Kunlun Si, they probably don't have the time to care about this. Huan Zun expressed his opinion. The Kunlun Si was once the ruler of this heavenly Tao. All forces and sect had to obey. With their status, they disdained to care about it. Qin Hao nodded. According to this, he had to go down and see if he could find some good things he needed. After leaving the divine wilderness, Qin Hao had some special products in his storage ring. They were items nurtured by a perfect heavenly Tao. Compared to other incomplete heavenly Taos, they should be very valuable. Let's go and take a look. Qin Hao floated down to the island, and everyone followed. The ground was very lively and full of people. It was as if they had returned to the cities of the divine wilderness continent. However, there were no grand restaurants on this island. There were only some simple taverns. They were located in the middle of the pavilions. The fragrance of wine was intoxicating. Moreover, the cultivators on the street were all extraordinary. Being able to come here from other planes was enough to prove their cultivation. Even if they were not in the celestial wheel realm, they were Emperor realm cultivators with divine implement. Reaching this realm meant that they had been reborn and had undergone a qualitative transformation. The men were more imposing, and the women were more beautiful. Even if Phoenix Flower Prime, Feng Lan, was here, she would not be too eye-catching. Spirit Stones. Qin Hao looked at a pavilion where a middle-aged man in plain clothes was setting up a stall. There were 3 stones placed there, red, blue, and green. The light they emitted was intense, and the fluctuations they emitted were not small. In particular, the red stone made the air in the pavilion scorching hot. It contained a flame will that could not be underestimated. These are spirit stones made in Kunlun. Do you want to buy them? The middle-aged man asked with a smile when he saw the guests. In the past, these 3 items would be priceless treasures to me. Unfortunately, Qin Hao shook his head and then walked away. The red spirit stone contained the power of the flames of the way that was comparable to the flames of the divine tree that grew in the demon zone of the valley of the burial of the gods. The blue stone carried a copious amount of water power and was incomparably pure. The green stone was filled with the will of the way of life. Every one of them was very rare. If Yi Xuehan refined the power of the blue stone, his cultivation would definitely improve greatly. But that was in the past. Now, Qin Hao was no longer interested. He had stepped into the god level. Only the divine stones were worth his attention. Let's go to the inner region of the Kunlun Sea to take a look. Qin Hao walked around a few times. Except for a few items that attracted his attention, most of them were useless to him. The prices of those items were too high and not worth it. The group of people flew into the air and headed toward the depths of the Kunlun Sea. Along the way, the spirit qi gathered between heaven and earth became more and more abundant. It was even more abundant than the spirit qi that was absorbed by the array set up by the divine palace. If one stayed here to cultivate, it would be a priceless treasure land for the Emperor realm. Soon, Qin Hao and the others arrived at an island in the inner region of the Kunlun Sea. Although it was called an island, its area was no less vast than the East continent. Here, a towering palace filled with divine light attracted Qin Hao's attention. He went straight to the palace. Divine Workshop. After landing, the illusion Zune looked up and saw two big words floating in front of the palace. They were condensed by vigorous divine power, showing the owner's powerful cultivation. They are really direct, Wuk said. Hanging the two words, Divine Workshop, so boldly was obviously telling everyone that everything here was needed by divine path experts. Only divine path experts were qualified to enter. Let's go in and take a look. Qin Hao stepped into the gate of the Divine Workshop. Without some ability, the owner of the Divine Workshop wouldn't be able to establish himself. He must be a big shot. Wait. Two guards stood in front of the gate and stopped Qin Hao. Everyone, the Divine Workshop only receives distinguished guests. Qin Hao smiled and understood what they meant. Then, the 9 realms light surrounded his body, and 3 rings of light particles rose from his body. Wuk also released his cultivation. The 9 realms light covered his body, and the sword will law was at the 3rd level. Is it okay? Qin Hao asked. Not yet. One of the guards shook his head. Buzz. At this time, the illusion Zune stepped forward. Under the operation of the divine power of space, the heavenly wheel emerged, releasing dazzling divine light. He said with a serious face, "What about now?" "Enough, senior." The 2 guards immediately let him pass. Their attitude improved a bit, but it didn't change much. They had seen many heavenly wheel experts, even those stronger than the illusion Zune. Moreover, the illusion Zune's heavenly wheel was more damaged. However, heavenly wheel experts were still heavenly wheel experts, and they were qualified to enter the Divine Workshop. This was the rule set by the owner, and they didn't dare to break it. I didn't expect that entering the Divine Workshop would be so strict. Qin Hao chuckled. With the illusion Zune accompanying them, they couldn't enter without heavenly wheel experts. Even Nirvana realm experts weren't qualified to enter. The interior of the Divine Workshop was very large, far more magnificent than what it looked like from the outside. It was divided into several areas. There were shops for selling goods, playing music, and drinking rooms. It was like a small world in the Kunlun Sea. Divine Grass. Qin Hao quickly walked towards a location. He was very sensitive to the aura of medicinal herbs. This was his instinct. After passing through rows of weapon and armor shops, he arrived at a medicinal herb shop. Qin Hao was immediately attracted by the 3-leaf clover hanging at the top of the shop. He pointed at it and said, "What kind of grass is this?" Guessed, "This is spirit refining grass. It comes from Kunwu Mountain and is extremely precious," the shopkeeper said with a smile. Wuk stared at the shopkeeper cautiously. He felt the sword intent coming from the shopkeeper. He was a sword god who had cast heavenly wheel. "I want it. How much is it?" Qin Hao looked at the shopkeeper and said directly. He naturally felt the cultivation of the shopkeeper. A sword god was a shopkeeper in a workshop. Even Emperor Du Hai and Emperor Bai wouldn't believe it. However, he didn't have time to care about this at the moment. What he cared about was the divine grass. Not only Qin Hao, but Muri, who was sleeping in Xiao Han's imperial body, also woke up. She was awakened by the aura of the spirit refining grass. Chapter 1974. The shopkeeper thought about it and said, "You are not from the Kunlun continent, right? The spirit-refining grass has a wide range of uses. It can fix the flaws in the heavenly wheel, strengthen the soul, and strengthen the divine power. It can also be used to fix the flaws in the heavenly wheel, but the effects vary from person to person. Perhaps it won't be too great, but you can also take it." Qin Hao interrupted him. The primordial world's alchemy supremacy clan could almost smell the herbs and know their uses and potency. The spirit-refining grass not only had the benefits the shopkeeper mentioned, but it could also be used as a supplementary material to refine the divine body. Senior Muri needed this grass. "So you are an expert. Then I will say it directly. It is a low-grade divine item," the shopkeeper said seriously. The shopkeeper said with a straight face. The divine workshop always sold things at fair prices. Qin Hao stared at the spirit-refining grass and was quite tempted. The shopkeeper was indeed very kind to use a low-grade divine item to exchange for it. After all, this was a divine herb that could fix the heavenly wheel, improve divine power, and refine the divine body. Whether it was Nirvana realm cultivators condensing precepts or minor heavenly wheel cultivators repairing the flaws in the heavenly wheel, the spirit-refining grass was useful in many ways. However, using a divine item to exchange for it made Qin Hao feel awkward. He only had the Great Void Cauldron. According to Shi Ming, the Great Void Cauldron was Yan Ming's weakest divine item. It should be a low-grade divine item. However, this cauldron was branded with a supreme divine technique. Its value was incomparable. It was a loss to exchange a divine item and divine technique for a divine herb. No need to exchange. At this time, Xiaohan looked at Qin Hao and spoke in Muri's tone. She knew how important the Great Void Cauldron was to Qin Hao, so she wasn't in a hurry to form the divine body. She could take her time in the future. Maybe she would find a better divine material. An apologetic look flashed across Qin Hao's face. When he left the divine palace, his senior sister had taken care of him many times. On the day of his and Han Er's wedding, Miaoli had not hesitated to use her life force to lay down the illusion of the divine palace for them. That shocking scene had stunned all the emperors and emperors who had come to witness the ceremony, making the wedding a masterpiece for all eternity. Now, he couldn't even exchange for a divine herb that his senior sister needed. "Sir, take a look and see if this divine item can be exchanged for the herb." Huan Zun took 2 steps forward. His palm flickered with divine light as he handed an ancient scroll to the shopkeeper. "Divine item, that's rare." The shopkeeper was a divine item. He Illusion Elder was a spatial divine item. A divine item was a spatial item. The ancient scroll was a spatial divine tool. It could be used to store things, and it could also store living things. It was a good tool to store things, but its power was very limited in battle. After the shopkeeper checked it, it was estimated that it couldn't even be sealed by a small wheel. It would be easy for people to break free with their divine power. The Illusion Lord couldn't help but blush. The ancient scroll was his natal divine weapon. He didn't expect that it wouldn't enter the eyes of the Kunlun continent's experts. "Senior Illusion Elder, you don't have to be like this." "Shopkeeper, can you take a look at the divine stone in my hand?" Qin Hao took out the High Heaven Jade and handed it over. The Ling Tian Jade was produced in the foothills of the God Burial Valley. That place contained the spatial energy of the perfect heavenly Tao. According to Qin Hao's conjecture, that place should be the divine territory of one of the 14 origin spirit gods. That person was proficient in spatial energy and should have been a god that controlled the space of the heavenly Tao. This item is strange, really strange. After the shopkeeper took it, his divine sense entered the High Heaven Jade. He was confused. "What's wrong?" Qin Hao asked. "Such a small divine stone. I didn't expect it to have such a large capacity. Also, The more the shopkeeper examined it, the more confused he became. It's an ore. It hasn't been polished or refined. It has great value. He could feel that the jade in his hand was filled with perfect heavenly Tao energy. This kind of item was very precious. Even in the universe, such a high-quality spatial divine stone was rare. It could only be produced in the immemorial realm. Can I exchange it for spirit refining grass? Qin Hao was overjoyed. The Ling Tianyu clearly met the shopkeeper's requirements. The divine desolate heavenly Tao was a perfect heavenly Tao, and the spiritual items it nurtured were the best of the best in the eyes of other heavenly wheel experts. Of course you can exchange it. However, are you sure you want to exchange it for spirit refining grass? The shopkeeper looked at Qin Hao with a serious expression. He felt bad for Qin Hao. The jade had great potential. Once it was created, it would be many times stronger than the old man's ancient scroll. The stronger the heavenly wheel, the more terrifying its power would be. However, was Qin Hao really willing to exchange it? He was worried that Qin Hao was just coaxing him. Exchange it. Qin Hao breathed a sigh of relief. He originally thought that the high heaven jade might not meet the shopkeeper's requirements. After all, in the divine desolate, although the high heaven jade was special, it did not seem to be that strong. However, why did he feel that the shopkeeper had made a huge profit? The other party's attitude was very satisfied. Good, the customer is so generous. In fact, it is a bit of a loss. How about this? I will add 2 more divine tools, as well as the spirit refining grass, in exchange for the spatial god stone. Iron King, what are you looking at? Quickly bring 2 divine tools over. This transaction can be considered done by both of us. The shopkeeper shouted at the broken weapons shop next door. Ha, okay. Bold and unrestrained laughter sounded out. In next to no time, a bearded middle-aged man with a tall and robust figure, whose violent muscles were filled with divine energy that was on the verge of bursting out, walked over with quick steps. His wide and thick palms held 2 divine swords as he passed them over to Qin Hao. I noticed the rebirth sword insight emitted by the 2 of you, so I'll give these 2 little things to you. There's no need to thank me. The Iron King's voice was very loud. He had a forthright personality and could see the cultivation direction of Qin Hao and Wuk at a glance. Therefore, he deliberately took 2 divine swords. At this time, the Iron King showed a greedy expression as he looked at the high heaven jade in the shopkeeper's hands. This stone was filled with the aura of the original realm and had the perfect spatial attribute of Wuk. If it was given to him to make a spatial divine tool, he could increase the value of the high heaven jade by 3 times, no, at least 5 times. He did not know where this group of people got it. In short, they could ask the shopkeeper for credit. Don't be fooled by my shop assistant's carefree attitude. When it comes to forging skills, the Iron King can be ranked in the top 2 in the entire divine workshop. You can rest assured about his work. The shopkeeper said. The Iron King was a little dissatisfied with this statement. What top 2? He thought that he could be ranked first. Come, let the guests try the swords. No need. Your swords are very sharp. Wuk took the 2 swords and handed one of them to Xiao Han. The true extreme sword master of the divine wilderness continent, a giant who stood at the peak of swordsmanship, was also the future master of swordsmanship in the divine wilderness. He could judge the strength of these 2 swords just by his perception. Indeed, as the shopkeeper said, the Iron King's craftsmanship was unquestionable. At least these 2 swords were the best swords Wuk had seen so far. Xiao Han smiled and took it. Because Qin Hao had the Great Void Sword, this one was more suitable for her to use. Now, she also had a divine tool. The Illusion Lord glanced at Qin Hao. Clearly, he was very embarrassed just now. Why did he suddenly feel that Qin Hao's pockets were extremely rich? At this time, many people around looked at the herb shop. Although the spirit refining grass was precious, it was not the best in the divine workshop. There were other spirit refining grasses on Kunwa Mountain, but the emptiness gate jade that Qin Hao took out attracted many people's attention. They began to wonder about Qin Hao's identity. If he could take out a jade that contained the aura of the original realm, his background should not be simple. Guests, would you like to come here and have a look? You can choose a few sets of divine technique. The divine techniques collected by the Divine Workshop are very powerful. The owners of the nearby shops began to take the initiative to invite them. I'll come again when I have time. Qin Hao responded with a smile. He left the herb shop with everyone and continued to walk forward. Ling Tianyu's aura attracted the attention of many cultivators. If he took out more, it would not be a good thing. Up ahead, many places shot out beams of divine light of the heavenly path. These were the light of the great path that the ritual treasures carried. The deeper they went, the more gorgeous the streets of the divine workshop became. Xiao Han and Kuang Tang were dazzled. The illusion lord had also never seen such a grand scene. Every divine item was very tempting. At this time, Qin Hao saw a familiar figure. It was a fat old man wearing a gray robe with his belly exposed. He was sitting on the side of the road with a wine gourd in his hand. Suddenly, this figure made Qin Hao wary. It's him. Seeing this person, Xiao Han was nervous. Not long ago, this fat old man had killed a heavenly wheel plane cultivator and kidnapped a young girl. Fate, we meet again. Guests, do you want to buy something? The old man also saw Qin Hao and the others and immediately greeted them with a smile. He took out those unsightly books again. Senior, we don't really need them. Goodbye. Qin Hao said softly, wanting to lead the group away from this person. Don't be nervous. Business in the Divine Workshop is consensual. No one dares to do anything here. I'm just curious about where you came from. Except for that old servant, you are not suppressed by the heavenly path of Kunlun. Or rather, the suppression is very slight. The old man said. He had noticed some clues. The heavenly path that we came from is the same as the heavenly path of Kunlun. We are all non-elemental heavenly path, so there is not much discomfort. Qin Hao explained. Kunlun had no god, so there was no divine pavilion for cultivators from other planes to comprehend the divine will. It depended on one's ability. They were the type of people who were least suppressed by the heavenly path. This old man is so careful. Kuang Tang whispered. Don't talk nonsense. He is still very dangerous, the illusion lord said. Even if he was good at spatial power, it would be difficult for him to escape from this old man. At least, under the heavenly path of Kunlun, the illusion lord could not escape. I see. The fat old man nodded and looked at Kuang Tang. Obviously, he had heard Kuang Tang's words, but he did not care too much. If there is nothing else, we will take our leave. Qin Hao cupped his hands and did not want to have too much to do with this old man. Dare I ask, what did you do to that girl? Wuck asked coldly. The fat old man's eyes turned cold. Then, he smiled and said, Nothing. She's dead. Dead. Xiao Han's heart trembled, and he secretly clenched his fists. This was cold-blooded. After playing with her for a while, it was boring, so I gave her release to avoid the pain of losing her father. I am still a very good person, the old man said with a smile, as if he had done a good deed. Wuck, Xiao Han, and even Kuang Tang had a cold look in their eyes. This old man was simply lawless. Unfortunately, their cultivation was not enough. If they were in the divine wilderness, they would not have let this person live. The cultivation world has always been like this, hasn't it? The old man did not care about the gazes of Qin Hao and the others. He took a sip of wine, and his body emitted an unbridled aura. Haha, yes, it has always been like this. But there is another saying in the cultivation world. Those who are unjust are doomed to destruction. Senior, you must be careful not to bump into people you should not bump into. Qin Hao was disgusted by this person's attitude. Because of their safety, they would not cause trouble if they could. But if the old man dared to do anything to them, Even if this was the heavenly path of Kunlun, Qin Hao could still ignore the heavenly path and kill this evil old man. Chapter 1975. Evil is doomed to destruction. I'm looking forward to it. The old man rolled his withered yellow eyes. Apart from the aristocratic families of the Kunlun continent, no one could touch him. He and the aristocratic families of the Kunlun continent had never interfered with each other. The people he kidnapped were all foreigners. However, the Sea of Kunlun was holding a Millennium event. Many top forces from the outside world had gathered here, including many heavenly wheel realm masters. There were indeed some people who couldn't be offended. Are you Senior Gui too? Suddenly, a group of figures passed by, stopping here. The one in the lead was a young man with a jade-like face. His eyes were bright like stars, and his bearing was extraordinary. You know the old man? The old man named Gui too was surprised and looked at the guards behind the young man. No wonder they were from the Lin family of Kunlun. My grandfather has met Senior several times. He once told us that if we meet Senior outside, we must treat Senior with respect. The young man said gently. Supreme God Gui too was infamous. He was a heavenly wheel realm elite who stood at the top of the Kunlun continent. However, he had never done anything that harmed the aristocratic families. He had even saved the descendants of the aristocratic families from danger several times. Since they met today, Lin Xian naturally went forward to greet him. Lin Xian's words moved many people on the street. Supreme God Ghost Butcher was the name of a ferocious god. The cultivators' faces would turn pale at the mere mention of his name. Due to his immense power, very few people had ever seen him in person. They didn't expect him to be this fat old man. Young Master Lin, you're too polite. Your ancestor Lin Xian is the real hero of Kunlun. I, Gui Tu, am far inferior to him. Gui Tu said loudly and arrogantly. At this time, he deliberately put on airs in front of Qin Hao and the others, as if to tell them that even the Kunlun Lin family had to treat him with respect, and that those who were unjust were doomed to destruction. Who could kill him? Qin Hao looked at the young man. The Lin family should be a powerful force in Kunlun. It might be equivalent to the supreme orthodoxy of the 5 realms in the divine wilderness. Senior, you're here. Did you find a lot of good things recently? Lin Xian asked with a smile. Gui Tu didn't come to the divine workshop to buy things, but to sell the divine items he had plundered. There is indeed a lot of land. Gui Tu didn't hide anything. With a wave of his hand, 6 or 7 divine items floated before Lin Xian, causing a small commotion among the people on the street. There's a mid-grade divine artifact. Qin Hao stared at the colorful divine items. One of the bracelets contained the power of divine will that was even stronger than the Great Void Cauldron. One could imagine how powerful it was. Every single one of these divine objects is stained with the blood of its master. Xiao Han said sorrowfully. From this, it could be seen that Gui Tu's strength was indeed terrifying. Otherwise, how could he have successfully killed 6 or 7 heavenly wheel realm cultivators? These things are not bad. It just so happens that I have a lot of resources on hand. I'll take them all. Senior, please name your price. Lin Xian said generously. The things that Gui Tu had robbed were naturally cheaper than the divine items of the divine workshop. He would not lose anything by buying them. Since the young master of the Lin family has taken a fancy to it, this old man will not hesitate to offer a price. Gui Tu smiled and secretly transmitted a message to Lin Xian. Immediately, Lin Xian's expression changed slightly. The price that Gui Tu offered was much higher than he had imagined. Senior, it is not easy to take 7 divine items at the same time. You also know that the Lin family is not the only young master of the Lin family. I want to help you dispose of the stolen goods, but you want to raise the status of the business to the same level as the divine workshop. I really don't understand. Lin Xian smiled a few times. His attitude was not as friendly as before. These things are not easy to get, especially that bracelet whose master's cultivation is not weak. He injured the old man's heavenly wheel realm. You get what you pay for. I risked my life to get it, and now I'm injured and need divine medicine to heal. If young Master Lin thinks it's too expensive, then don't buy it. The old man can wait for other fated people. Maybe they can sell it at a better price. Gui Tu narrowed his eyes. The price he offered was already lower than that of the divine workshop. He didn't believe that Lin Xian would not be tempted. After all, in order to participate in the grand event, Lin Xian's team also needed a batch of divine objects to replenish their strength. Okay, I'll take them all. Lin Xian sighed and nodded. He threw a storage ring to Gui Tuesday. Gui Tu checked it with his will and nodded with satisfaction. Now all these divine objects belong to young Master Lin. Lin Xian motioned for his men to put away the divine objects. The business was completed happily. Let's go, Wuk said to Qin Hao. He was indeed a top family in Kunlun. A descendant stood up and easily took 6 or 7 divine objects. His wealth was stronger than theirs. Qin Hao nodded and continued to take everyone to walk around the divine workshop to see if they could find suitable items. Behind them, Lin Xian and the others followed. No matter where Qin Hao went, Lin Xian followed. At first, Qin Hao didn't care. Maybe it was a coincidence, but after a while, he felt that something was wrong with Lin Xian. It seemed that he had a motive. Phoenix feathers. Qin Hao suddenly stopped and was attracted by a demonic beast shop. He looked over and saw 3 phoenix feathers and a piece of beast bone. It's a phoenix bone. Tang Tang's heart trembled a few times. He recognized the beast bone. These were real phoenix feathers and bones. The phoenix was a divine bird. Because of the war of the gods, the divine wilderness had lost the bloodline of the divine bird. Even the phoenix god had died in battle. Now they had encountered real divine feathers and bones. How much? Xiao Han asked with a slightly excited look. If he used the phoenix feathers and bones to build a body for his sister, with the help of the spirit refining grass, she could definitely reach the celestial wheel plane. 2 divine implements, or 2 items of the same value as divine implements, the shop owner said. The shopkeeper said. He was a cultivator who didn't look very old, about 30 years old. His clothes were shabby. The shop owner's cultivation was not high. He was not comparable to the shopkeeper of the herb shop and the Iron King. He was only at the Nirvana plane. Moreover, Qin Hao did not sense the aura of laws from him, which proved that he had not even condensed the laws. If he dared to use the phoenix feathers and bones to set up a stall like in the pavilion before, he would definitely be robbed. No wonder he came to the divine workshop to sell. After all, everything in the divine workshop was under the protection of the owner. 2 divine implements, or items of the same value. Qin Hao took a shallow breath. Sure enough, divine objects had to be exchanged with divine objects. Fortunately, the shop owner was not strict about the grade. In other words, low-grade divine implements could also be exchanged. It seemed that the other party was also in a hurry to make a move. He understood that it was not safe to keep the phoenix feathers. I'll buy them. Xiao Han transmitted his voice to Qin Hao. There was nothing more suitable than these 2 items to build a divine body for his sister. Qin Hao nodded. As the master of the heavenly path in the divine wilderness, he had taken many things from the original realm before he left. Although the 2 divine implements were not cheap, he could afford them. If it was not possible, he could exchange them with the twin swords forged by the Iron King. I also want these treasures. At this time, a series of footsteps was heard. Lin Xian came into the shop with the masters of his family. In an instant the shop was filled. This scene immediately frightened the shop owner. Qin Hao's pupils shrank as he stared at Lin Xian. Was he going to rob him? Lin Xian did not pay attention to Qin Hao. He was still looking at the shop owner, his innate superior aura intimidating the other party. Since Master Lin has taken a fancy to them, there is no problem. Obviously, the shop owner was also from the Kunlun continent and knew Lin Xian. All right. Lin Xian nodded and handed over the 2 divine implements to the other party. He was about to take the phoenix feathers and divine bones. Qin Hao took a step forward and stretched out his hand, sweeping away Lin Xian's arm. He said in a low voice, "What is the meaning of this?" He had already discussed with the shop owner before and was ready to buy them. Now Lin Xian had taken the initiative. The shop owner did not even ask for Qin Hao's opinion and directly sold the divine feathers and divine bones to others. Obviously, he was afraid of Lin Xian's family. Lin Xian smiled and looked at Qin Hao. He said, "I'll buy them. They belong to you. Let's make friends." Friends? Qin Hao was slightly stunned. He wanted to make friends with 2 divine objects. His purpose was probably not simple. "Yes, I, Lin Xian, am willing to make friends with you. In a while, the Kunlun Flourishing Sea event will be held. I see that you all have extraordinary temperament. Why don't you come with me?" Lin Xian said. Qin Hao immediately understood that Lin Xian was going to bribe him and make him his subordinate. However, Qin Hao also noticed that the family masters behind Lin Xian were all looking at them coldly and emitting a sense of oppression. It seemed that they had no choice but to agree. Lin Xian's purpose was definitely not limited to this. In fact, Qin Hao's intuition was right. Lin Xian had already noticed them when he bought the spirit-refining grass with the original space stone. After that, he had been secretly following them. Lin Xian only found a chance to show up when they met Divine Master Gitu. Qin Hao could take out a divine stone that contained the aura of the original realm. Lin Xian was able to judge many things by observing their behavior. He thought that Qin Hao must have more. Even if he didn't, it would be good to accept this group of people. At least the Illusion Venerable was a celestial wheel realm cultivator and qualified to follow him. No need. I saw the divine feather and divine bone first. Sir Lin, can you give them to us? Qin Hao said lightly. As the saying went, one should not accept a reward without doing anything. Giving 2 divine objects as a gift on the first meeting showed that he had ulterior motive. The Lin family is one of the 3 divine path families in Kunlun. It is an honor to follow Sir Lin Xian. I advise you to think about it carefully. Lin Xian did not continue to speak. A family master beside him said coldly. There was no ruler of the heavenly path in Kunlun. Other than the Kunlun Sea, the Lin family and the other 2 families had the absolute right to speak. My friends and I are used to being undisciplined. We are determined to travel the untainted land. Sir Lin, we appreciate your kindness, but we cannot accept it. Qin Hao did not need to consider it at all. No matter what the other party's goal was, it was impossible for him to be a subordinate. Lin Xian's eyes flashed sharply. He stared at Qin Hao for a moment. The atmosphere in the shop began to become tense. Then, Lin Xian suddenly laughed and broke the atmosphere. He said to the shabby shop owner, "Give it to them." The shop owner did not dare to offend Lin Xian and took the initiative to return the divine objects. Qin Hao was about to buy it, but the shop owner said timidly, "I don't want to sell the divine feather and divine bone for now. Sorry." Buzz. A sword will swirled around Wuck's body. A terrifying light shot out from his eyes, as if it could penetrate the shop owner's head and kill him instantly. Not only Wuck, Quang Tang, and even the Illusion Venerable were furious. They all knew that Qin Hao had been humiliated. "Forget it, we don't want it." Xiao Han shook his head at Qin Hao. The voice belonged to Muri. Muri understood Qin Hao's intentions. The phoenix feather and bone were very precious to her. Moreover, the price was very low. Who would have thought that after Lin Xian's interference, the shop owner would be so scared that he did not dare to sell it? Although Lin Xian had given up, the shop owner was afraid that after selling it to Qin Hao, he would offend the Lin family of Kunlun. Qin Hao's personality was very proud. Wuk, Xiaohan, and Muri all knew that he was never afraid of pressure. She was worried that if she continued to stay here, she would fall out with Lin Xian and offend a divine Dao force in Kunlun. At present, Qin Hao was still very dangerous. Muri was also very angry. Compared to the safety of Qin Hao and everyone else, even if she had to suffer some humiliation, she did not want to see them get hurt because of this. Haha, Your Excellency's business has no principles at all. No wonder you are in such dire straits. Moreover, I'm afraid you will never be able to make a name for yourself in this lifetime. Qin Hao sneered at the shop owner. He turned around and left the shop with everyone. If it wasn't for the fact that his senior sister was only a soul, and if it wasn't for the fact that he was afraid that everyone would get hurt, he would not have allowed Lin Xian to be so arrogant. After Qin Hao and the others left, the destitute shop owner lowered his head. Blue veins appeared on his palms. He felt a great humiliation. Of course, he wanted to be a man of principles. However, he could not afford to offend the Lin family. If he dared to sell it, the owner of the divine workshop might not be able to protect him. Young master, should we take them down? A cultivator of the Lin family looked at the backs of Qin Hao and the others with an ominous glint in his eyes. Lin Xian waved his hand and said with a smile, "There's no need to rush. The workshop owner's cultivation is not below my grandfather's. This place is not suitable for a battle. They can't escape from my hands." Chapter 1976. Qin Hao and the others left the demonic beast shop and walked around the divine mill a few times. They didn't find anything they needed, so they left. The Kunlun continent is indeed a top great realm of the Great Path. The divine mill made the old man feel relaxed and happy. After they came out, Huan Zun praised this trip. The Dongwang realm didn't have a place like the divine mill that could accommodate so many treasures. There are indeed many treasures in the divine mill, but not many that we need, Qin Hao said as he walked. He had always had good taste. Except for the spirit-refining herb, he didn't care about anything else. The phoenix feather and the divine bone had been ruined by Lin Xian, so it was a pity that he couldn't buy them. Maybe more treasures will appear after the Kunlun flourishing sea meet is over, Huan Zun said. I'm afraid no one will be willing to sell them. Wuk pointed to a palace in the distance. Let's stay there first and wait for the meet to start. This island belonged to the inner islands of the Kunlun Sea, close to the core area. Once the meet started, the news would quickly spread here, making it convenient for them to participate. Qin Hao nodded and prepared to stay in a palace in the palace. But at this time, a ray of light appeared in the sky. Several young women arrived on colorful clouds. They were dignified and beautiful, attracting the attention of many cultivators. Disciples of the Kunlun Sea. Someone next to him said with admiration in his eyes. Qin Hao raised his head and saw a few ladies riding on colorful clouds flying towards him. They descended slowly and stood in front of Qin Hao. They smiled and cupped their fists. Are you here to participate in the grand meeting? Yes, what can I do for you? Qin Hao asked politely. He was surprised that they were looking for them. It seemed that they had come specially. Lotus Goddess invites you to meet. Would you like to do us the honor? A woman said with a smile. Qin Hao was even more surprised. It seemed that Lotus Goddess had some status in the Kunlun Sea. Why would she take the initiative to invite them? Could it be? Qin Hao thought of Ling Tianyu. He was afraid that the news of the space jade in the original realm had leaked and reached her ears. Therefore, Lotus Goddess had sent someone to invite them. He didn't know the relationship between the owner of the Divine Mill and the Kunlun Sea. Did they deliberately release the news, or did Kunlun Sea have many spies and know everything that happened here? If it was the latter, then the strength of the Kunlun Sea was terrifying. Great. Qin Hao nodded and accepted the invitation. There was no harm in meeting Lotus Fairy. Kunlun Heavenly Lake, Lotus Fairy will be waiting for you. We still have to invite other people, so we'll have to trouble you to go ahead first," the woman said politely. After that, there was light under their feet, and they rode the colorful clouds in other directions. Not only in this island city, but in other island cities, there were also cultivators invited by Lotus Fairy's palace. "Let's go," Qin Hao said. Illusion Zun nodded slightly and asked a local. Only then did he know the location of Heaven Lake. The group rose into the air and went straight to Kunlun Heaven Lake. Kunlun Heaven Lake was located at the core of Kunlun Sea. It was a divine lake under the control of the sect. Lotus Goddess was able to sit here, which was enough to prove her noble status. At this moment, many outstanding figures had gathered at the heavenly lake. They had all been invited here. They walked up the spotlessly white palace steps and arrived at the core area of the Kunlun Sea sections. No one continued to fly, as that would be too impolite. After Qin Hao and the others arrived at Heaven Lake, they slowly landed from the air and followed the invited guests up the palace step. Along the way, the female disciples of Kunlun Sea welcomed them and led them to Lotus Goddess. Heaven Lake was very big. Looking at it, it was like a blue wave flowing in the air. Lotus flowers surrounded it, and the fragrance overflowed. It was like a fairyland. Numerous palaces were situated on the blue sea, surrounded by tens of thousands of flowers. At this moment, Lotus Fairy and many other cultivators were seated on an open-air platform. There were many seats and it was very spacious. Although there were many cultivators present, it was not crowded. Everyone had their own space. The Kunlun Sea disciple who led the way led Qin Hao and the others to one of the seats. After Qin Hao took his seat, he looked ahead and discovered that there was a woman standing in front of countless martial artists. She had an extraordinary appearance. Her eyes were clear, and her skin was as smooth as jade. She was as beautiful as the morning sun even without any makeup. She wore a green lotus dress and looked like a saintess of the 9 heavens. So beautiful. Even Xiao Han was dazed for a moment. She is indeed a real fairy-like woman. Qin Hao agreed. He had recultivated for several lifetimes and had seen countless women, but none of them could compare to Lotus Goddess. Even Xiao Han and Wei Wei could not compare. It was not that they were inferior, but Han Er's current realm was not at Lotus Goddess's level. Naturally, he did not have her bearing and aura. Her cultivation is not below old man's, Huan Zun praised. Judging from cultivation and age, Lotus Goddess was far younger than Huan Zun. However, she had reached the celestial wheel realm. The talent of the Kunlun Sea disciples was indeed terrifying. "Hey, what are you looking at?" Qin Hao gave Wu Kei a push. To think that this silly brat would actually become absent-minded. "You are not even blinking your eyes, it is very impolite. I just feel that her aura is very comfortable." Wuk hurriedly adjusted his attitude. He was indeed a little impolite. "Quibble. If you like her, just say it." Crag Tang reached out his hand and searched the delicacies on the table. He was not interested in women. He was an emotionless person. "Do you think I am pretty?" At this moment a laugh sounded. Then, a green dress fluttered in front of everyone's eyes. Lotus Goddess stood in front of Wuk and looked into his eyes. Qin Xiaohe, a core disciple of the Kunlun Sea. After the death of Zihua Exalted, every Kunlun Sea mourned Exalted would send a core disciple to entertain the strong cultivators. This time, Qin Xiaohe was in charge of the nearby area. Of course, she was not the only core disciple. Other than the Heavenly Lake, there were other places where people of similar status as Qin Xiaohe entertained other strong cultivators. "I am sorry. Fairy, please don't blame my brother." Qin Hao hurriedly apologized. "You think I am pretty, don't you?" Qin Xiaohe ignored Qin Hao and continued to stare at Wuk. "Yes, you are." For some reason, Wuk suddenly felt a little nervous. He seemed to be tongue-tied and couldn't speak properly. He was completely different from the proud sword cultivator who only focused on the sword. "Ha! Qin Xiaohe covered her mouth and chuckled. She looked at Qin Hao and said, I am Qin Xiaohe from the Kunlun Sea. How should I address you? Qin Xiaohe? Xiao Han looked at Qin Hao strangely. Relatives? No wonder he purposely found them and invited them here. Ahem, I am Li Chuji. This is my wife, Xiao Han. Qin Hao looked at Xiao Han innocently. He didn't know Qin Xiaohe at all. Illusion. The illusion god introduced himself. I am Shou Wuk. Wuk didn't dare to look into Qin Xiaohe's eyes. He used his free hand to push Crazed Tang. Crazed Tang was like a vicious dog that only knew how to eat and drink. He was completely indifferent. Sorry, there is something wrong with his brain, Wuk said awkwardly. He looked up at Qin Xiaohe and then hurriedly lowered his head. It's over. Qin Hao shook his head and thought. The future divine master of the sword Dao in the divine wilderness was probably going to fall today. Qin Xiaohe smiled slightly. This fellow called Shou Wuk was rather interesting. She naturally knew how outstanding her looks were, especially when compared to her strength. Other than the sect master and the patriarchs of several aristocratic families, her every move was the focus of attention in the Kunlun continent. The number of people pursuing her was uncountable. Usually, those who saw her, no matter how high their status was, would feel ashamed of their inferiority under the pressure of her looks and cultivation. Even the proud sons of the divine Dao aristocratic families were no exception. Occasionally, those who dared to look at her would have greed in their eyes. But this Shou Wuk, who looked like an ignorant little boy, was rather cute. I wonder which world these experts came from to have the original realm divine stone. Qin Xiaohe no longer teased Shou Wuk and said to Qin Hao. Her subordinates had reported that Li Chuji was the core of this group. Original realm divine stone. Qin Xiaohe's simple and crude words immediately caused all the experts at the Heavenly Lake banquet to focus their gazes on Qin Hao's group. We don't dare to call ourselves experts. We came from the sword world and were lucky enough to obtain an original realm divine stone from a certain senior. That senior once said that his name was not to be revealed. Otherwise, not only would we be in trouble, anyone who heard his name would have their lives in danger. For the sake of Fairy's safety, it is best not to say it. Qin Hao replied with a smile. His words caused Qin Xiaohe to fall into deep thought. What's so inconvenient about it? Don't tell me he's going to kill all of us here, ha ha. Someone laughed wildly. There were no less than 10 Heavenly Wheel Realm experts gathered here today, and each of them had their own background. Even a divine master would not dare to say that he could take them all down. The original realm divine stone can only be found in the immemorial realm. Could it be that they met an expert from the immemorial realm? Save it. The immemorial realm isn't a place you can enter as you wish. The rules there are very strict. Recently, a martial god appeared in the sword world. This person is extremely arrogant and has defeated several famous sword gods in the sword world. He even threatened to challenge the master of the sword world. It is said that he has an item from the original realm on him. An old man said solemnly. As he spoke, he looked at Qin Hao's group as if confirming something. Martial god? Qin Hao's heart trembled. Could it be a martial lord senior? To be able to take out an item from the original realm and be a martial god, he was most likely a martial lord senior from the divine wilderness. If the martial god that the old man spoke of was really a martial lord senior, this news was absolutely shocking to Qin Hao's group. Cough cough. We don't know any martial god who dares to challenge the divine master of the great sword world. How could this junior know such remarkable cultivation? Qin Hao flatly denied this to all the experts present. However, his indifferent appearance made them even more convinced that they had encountered the martial god. Is it really a martial god? No wonder. Lotus Fairy nodded lightly. Other than the immemorial realm's divine king, only the martial god of the sword world could take out an item from the original realm. However, the origin of the martial god was a mystery. Although he had been staying in the sword world, he hadn't received the recognition of the heavenly wheel realm expert. It was very likely that his origin was not in the sword world. Did Lotus Fairy invite us to inquire about the divine stone? If that's the case, are you satisfied now? Goodbye. Showuk directly stood up, as if he had become a different person. The aura he exuded was incomparably cold. Martial Lord was a senior from the divine wilderness and was of the same origin as him. Moreover, he was the divine palace's great ancestor, his senior. Wuk didn't like people with ulterior motives putting their thoughts on him and his friends and elders. If that was Lotus Fairy's goal, then it could only be said that he, Showuk, had made a mistake. Qin Xiaohe's goal was not pure, so it was fine if they didn't get to know each other. Chapter 1977. The martial god was most likely the martial lord senior. It wasn't hard to tell from the discussions of the experts that the martial lord senior had a shocking cultivation. He had defeated several famous sword gods of the sword world and wanted to challenge the lord of the sword world. Who would have thought that after 10,000 years, the martial lord senior, who had become a god from the divine wilderness, would be so powerful? Apart from the Archean realm, he could probably do whatever he wanted in the untainted land. Even so, Wuk didn't want too much focus on the martial lord senior. You worry too much. I'm just curious about you. Even if I want to find the whereabouts of the martial god, what can I do to him? Qin Xiaohe looked at Wuk. His temper was quite fierce. Could she provoke the martial god? In the entire divine world, only divine Lord Tianyong had the strength to come in contact with the martial god. She was just a little Tianluan. How could she be qualified to threaten that giant? However, Qin Xiaohe was like the others. Wuk's performance confirmed her guess. These people must have a relationship with the martial god. No wonder you didn't accept the invitation of the Lin clan. Turns out that you have the martial god behind you. At this moment, a voice sounded. Everyone looked over and saw a group of experts flying over. They didn't step on the palace steps but directly landed on the rooftop. Immediately, many people stood up and cupped their hands to the newcomers. Young Master Lin Xian. It was one of the 3 divine path giants of the Kunlun continent, Lin Xian of the Lin clan. Lin Xian greets Fairy He. After Lin Xian landed, he didn't pay attention to Qin Hao and the others as if they didn't exist. Instead, he politely greeted Qin Xiaohe. Young Master Lin, you don't have to be so polite. Take a seat, Fairy, he said calmly. Thank you. Lin Xian led the group of strong cultivators to their seat. He smiled and looked at the strong cultivators on the balcony. Then, he looked at Qin Hao and said, Friends, it seems like fate has brought us together. It's not fate. I was just invited by Fairy He. Qin Hao replied indifferently and pulled Wuk back to his seat. Do you know each other? Qin Xiaohe asked. We met a few hours ago in the divine workshop. Young Master Li felt like an old friend at first sight and I admired him. Who knew that young Master Li didn't like me? Lin Xian chuckled. On Tiantai, the strong cultivators from all over the world looked surprised. Lin Xian was from the Lin clan in Kunlun, which was one of the 3 local clans of the Celestial Path. Outside of Kunlun, the Lin clan was at the top of the world. Lin Xian had a high status, and yet he was being looked down upon by these independent cultivators? A glib tongue. You call that appreciation? Xiao Han said coldly. He didn't have a good impression of this Lin Xian. Although this person was of noble birth and had an extraordinary appearance, he was a bit of a hypocrite. Little Han. The illusion elder shook his head at Xiao Han, indicating for him to stop talking. They had come from afar. The Lin family was not only powerful, but they were also a Shinto family in the Kunlun continent. It was definitely not wise to have a conflict with the local Shinto here. Xiao Han's expression was cold. She shifted her gaze away from Lin Xian and did not say anything else. However, Lin Xian chuckled and persistently asked, "Miss, do you think that I do not admire you?" If it wasn't admiration, what was Lin Xian's actions? Buying things to give to others? Was he cheap? Xiao Han looked at Lin Xian, wanting to say something, but stopped. The illusion elder kept winking at her, and the atmosphere of the banquet became slightly unpleasant. Seeing this, Qin Xiaohe said, "You all came for my sect's grand occasion. You are all distinguished guests of the Kunlun Sea. Let's just forget about some unpleasant things." "Fairy, you are too serious. There is nothing unpleasant. I am just curious. Why does this miss think that it is not appreciation?" Lin Xian maintained a smile on his face, but he still refused to let it go and change the topic again. Qin Hao frowned. What was Lin Xian trying to do? Even though the Lotus Fairy had personally come out to mediate, he still refused to let it go. How could Xiao Han answer this? At the Heaven Lake banquet, all the experts looked at the two sides. Lin Xian's attitude seemed to be very tough, and it seemed like he wanted to force the cold woman to bow her head and admit her mistake. This scene was very interesting to the expert. After a while, the grand event of the Kunlun Sea will be held. I see that Mr. Lin has an extraordinary temperament. At that time, why don't you join me? Qin Hao suddenly said. My young master Li Chuji is the peerless genius of the Great Path Sword world. Few people can be compared to him. It would be an honor to follow my young master. I advise Mr. Lin to think about it carefully, Wu Kei said with a cold face. He returned the threat of the Divine Square's Lin family's powerhouse. Ha 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 ha! In an instant, there was a wave of laughter on the rooftop. The banquet of the Lotus Fairy today was really interesting. No one knew where this group of people got the courage to say that they wanted the Lin Divine Square of Kunlun to follow them. The peerless genius of the Great Path of Sword? You're talking nonsense. The experts at the banquet laughed while eating. They wanted Lin Xian to be their subordinate. What did they think the Lin Divine Square of Kunlun was? Could it be considered as public ridicule? At this moment, Lin Xian was also in a daze. This was not the result he had been waiting for. Instead, Qin Hao had stepped all over him and asked him, Lin Xian, to be a follower. He had never thought that someone would dare to say such a thing. Yes, on the day of the grand event, I will follow Mr. Li. Lin Xian didn't get angry. Coming from a divine path aristocratic family, he always maintained the demeanor of someone in a superior position. He still had a smile on his face and acted as if he really did admire Qin Hao and didn't hesitate to lower himself. You are indeed a divine path family of the Kunlun continent. Mr. Lin is magnanimous. I am ashamed. It seems that we were rude before. Qin Hao laughed loudly. He was also very free and easy. It seemed that he and Lin Xian really hit it off at first sight. However, the experts at the banquet were all astute. They knew that what they saw was only the surface. Qin Hao and Lin Xian's real thoughts were not what they showed on the surface. As the banquet continued, Qin Hao and Lin Xian continued to argue, causing everyone to understand that perhaps Lin Xian had invited Qin Hao to follow him, but had been rejected. Because of that, Lin Xian had been displeased, leading to the current situation. From the perspective of a bystander, no one thought that Lin Xian had done anything wrong. With his status in the Kunlun continent, he was naturally qualified to be followed by Qin Hao and a group of people. On the other hand, what right did Qin Hao have to be followed by a direct descendant of the divine son of the Lin divine clan? The status of the two was completely unequal. There was no conflict. As the two argued, everything seemed to have been resolved. As Lotus Fairy said, all the unhappiness seemed to have passed. However, the experts from all walks of life understood that this banquet was only the beginning of the two sides. Lin Xian would definitely take action next because Li Chuji and his group had offended the Lin divine clan of Kunlun. During this period of time, we must be careful of this person. Illusion Elder secretly transmitted his voice. His expression was particularly solemn. The Lin Divine clan was a giant in Kunlun. Lin Xian was a smiling tiger and would definitely not give up. From the fact that he had forced Xiao Han to bow his head, it could be seen that he was very proud. Qin Hao had attacked him in public and did not give face to the Lin Divine clan of Kunlun. Lin Xian would probably remember this grudge. Wuk and Xiao Han both nodded. Qin Hao's gaze was exceptionally deep. No one knew what he was thinking. This Lin Xian relied on his strong background and did not care about others at all. From the moment they met until now, he had acted as if whatever Qin Hao said was law. Everyone in Kunlun had to listen to him, as if he was the executor of the heavenly Tao. This feeling made Qin Hao very unhappy, especially when Lin Xian had interfered with the phoenix feather and the divine bone that senior sister needed. These two divine treasures were very important. It would be difficult to see them again in the future. After the grand meeting, there will be many opportunities of the divine path. Everyone has come from all over the world. I hope that this trip to the Kunlun Sea will be fruitful. If anyone wants to stay and cultivate in the Kunlun Sea in the future, you can come and find me directly. Lotus Fairy said. I've been looking forward to the Kunlun Sea for a long time. For hundreds of years, I've been sleepwalking, hoping to find the opportunities left by Zihua Supreme. Unfortunately, due to the limitation of my cultivation, I wasn't qualified to participate before. Now that I'm participating in this grand meeting, I must train well. Maybe I can cultivate with you in the future. That would be my fortune. Lin Xian looked at Qin Xiaohe and said, as if he had completely forgotten what had just happened. Lord Lin, I'm looking forward to it. Lotus Fairy smiled faintly. The three divine path families in Kunlun had a strong foundation. Their descendants naturally couldn't cultivate in the Kunlun Sea. The real goal of the three families was to seize the power of the supreme divine path and try to become the ruler of the heavenly path. There wasn't anything particularly important at the Heaven Lake banquet. Qin Xiaohe invited everyone here to get acquainted with them. Perhaps there would be a chance to meet them in the future. However, the atmosphere of the banquet today was a little unpleasant because of the secret competition between Qin Hao and Lin Xian. Although the two sides didn't pursue the matter in the end, the banquet was still affected. Soon, Qin Hao's group was also isolated by many cultivators. No one came forward to talk to them. On the contrary, these cultivators from all over the world chatted happily with each other. Many of them began to call each other brothers and wanted to invite each other to their continents as guests. Overall, the banquet was harmonious. Only Qin Hao's group was extremely cold. After all, Qin Hao had offended the Lin family. At this time, cultivators from other realms couldn't come to make friends with Qin Hao. They didn't want to invite trouble. After staying for a while, Qin Hao lost interest in the banquet. He took the initiative to say goodbye and left with Wuk and the others. Instead of staying and sitting on the cold bench, it was better to walk around and see if they could find something useful. Qin Xiaohe didn't ask Qin Hao to stay. She let them leave on their own. Looking at their backs, Qin Xiaohe's eyes fell on Wuk. She also felt an inexplicable sense of closeness from Wuk. She didn't know why. Leaving the banquet in the middle is disrespectful to Lotus Fairy. After leaving the Heaven Lake, Illusion Zun said, I don't feel comfortable staying here. Qin Hao was very direct. Third day, the matter of the martial god. Wuk looked at Illusion Zun. Illusion Zun said, if it's not convenient, I'll walk around alone. Xiao Han, you and Tang Guang accompany Senior to walk around. Later, Wuk and I will find you, Qin Hao said. It wasn't that he was treating Illusion Zun as an outsider. It was just that there were some things that Illusion Zun didn't know. Especially when their current situation wasn't good. And don't eat anymore. Xiao Han nodded. He pulled Tang Guang and left with Illusion Zun. Senior, don't mind him. Xiao Han said to Illusion Zun. Don't worry. Qin Hao is very different from before. He's very calm now. Since he didn't say anything, he naturally has his own difficulties. Illusion Zun understood Qin Hao very well. The three of them walked along the street and gradually blended into the crowd. On the other side, Qin Hao and Wuk walked side by side into a tea house. Could the martial god really be senior martial monarch? Wuk found a seat and sat down. It's pretty close, Qin Hao said seriously. Chapter 1978. There might be more than one heavenly wheel expert with the title of martial god, but there was only one martial god who could take out an item from the original realm. Putting the two together, Qin Hao's strong intuition told him that it was most likely a senior martial monarch. I didn't expect senior to be so famous after leaving the divine wilderness. Wuk chuckled. Martial Lord was climbing to the level of Sword Realm's divine master, and they were ashamed of their inferiority. When this matter is over, we will go to the great Tao Sword Realm and meet martial god. Qin Hao's eyes were filled with anticipation. Whether it was real or fake, they would know once they met. Wuk nodded. Before them, two gods left the divine wilderness, Martial Lord and Yen Ming. Yen Ming's seniority was above Martial Lord, and he was an expert of the same generation as the origin spirit 14 gods. Now, they didn't know where senior Yen Ming was, but they unexpectedly learned about old ancestor Martial Lord. Qin Hao originally had the idea of bringing Wuk to the Sword Realm. Only by proving divinity in the Sword Realm could Wuk's Sword Realm divine power be stronger. Coincidentally, old ancestor Martial Lord was also there, and his strength was extremely tyrannical. They wouldn't have to worry about being bullied by others, and they would have a legitimate identity in the Sword Realm. After all, they were the disciples of Martial God. Wuk was excited, and the more he thought about it, the more he longed for it. He couldn't wait to fly to the Sword Realm and meet with Senior Martial Lord. Guests, please have some tea. Our tea house has just received first-grade immortal tea. At this time, a middle-aged man came over with tea and placed it on the table. Wuk was in a good mood. He poured a cup, picked up the cup, and was about to drink it in one gulp. Slap! Qin Hao raised his arm and grabbed Wuk's wrist, stopping him from drinking. His gaze contained sharpness as he stared at the middle-aged man who brought the tea. What's wrong? Wuk asked. There's poison in the tea, Qin Hao said in a low voice. As soon as he said this, Wuk's expression changed. Guest, you must be joking. How could the tea in our tea house be poisonous? The middle-aged man smiled with a hint of panic in his eyes. Drink it. Wuk suddenly stood up and handed the cup to the middle-aged man. You drink. No, no, no. I'm just a servant of the tea house. How could I be qualified to drink such expensive tea? The middle-aged man hurriedly declined. I'll give it to you. The owner of the tea house won't blame you. Drink it. Wuk raised his voice and shouted. They did not understand why the middle-aged man would poison them, but what kind of person was Qin Hao? He was the main deity of the divine desolate heavenly Tao and came from the primordial alchemy sovereign clan. His ability to sense medicine and poison was unimaginably terrifying. Whether there was poison in the tea or not, Qin Hao could tell with a single sniff. There was no way he was wrong. This middle-aged man harbored ill intentions. Drink, Qin Hao said to the middle-aged man with an equally cold expression. Our tea house is famous in the Kunlun Sea. You dare to frame me for poisoning and ruin the reputation of our tea house. This is unforgivable. Come, seal the surrounding space. Irrelevant people, please leave. Please forgive me. The middle-aged man ordered loudly, his eyes filled with killing intent. Boom. The guests of the tea house left one after another. A group of valiant cultivators quickly surrounded Qin Hao and Wuk as if they had been prepared in advance. Qin Hao and Wuk looked at each other and smiled silently. You're still cherishing each other when you're about to die. You're looking down on me. Kill them for me. The middle-aged man said in a ruthless voice and waved his arm. In an instant, the aura of more than 10 cultivators burst out and Emperor light swept across. The weakest one was at the True Self realm. There were 3 Nirvana realm cultivators among them. They did not hesitate at all and attacked directly. More than 10 emperors burst out with the power of rules at the same time in such a narrow space. The will of Wei produced in an instant was enough to tear an ordinary Nirvana realm cultivator into pieces. Obviously, the other party had figured out Qin Hao and Wux's cultivation and wanted to kill them with one blow. At this moment, many people had gathered outside the tea house. After hearing the commotion, the passers-by all turned their attention to the tea house. Qin Hao and Wux both had extraordinary temperaments, but no one knew what mistake they had made or who they had offended. Many people had already started to mourn for them. However, under the bombardment of the dozens of earth-shattering powers, a sword light bloomed and broke through the Emperor's attacks. The passers-by outside the tea house saw that the cultivators in a circle, including the middle-aged man, fell to the ground one after another. They were all killed in an instant. Qin Hao and Wux were unharmed. In fact, no one even saw who had done it. "Let's go," Qin Hao said to Wux. The two turned into swords and disappeared. Everything happened so fast that it was as if they had never appeared. Only now did people see clearly that the dozen cultivators on the ground in the tea house had their foreheads pierced by powerful sword chi. Their souls were gone. The middle-aged man's face was filled with terror. "What powerful sword cultivators," someone said in fear. They had killed more than 10 emperors in an instant, including 3 Nirvana realm cultivators. None of them were lucky enough to escape. They had no chance to dodge the fatal blow. From this, it could be seen how terrifying the two youths were. They were probably cultivators who had condensed precepts. Not only Qin Hao and Wux were attacked, but Xiao Han and Tang Tang, who were accompanying the illusion sovereign on the street where the tea house was located, were also attacked. At this time, 2 figures were floating in the air. Tianluan's light was dazzling, radiating a suffocating divine path pressure. Opposite the illusion sovereign, a Tianluan cultivator stood. His clothes fluttered as divine light flowed around his body. He was using his divine will to suppress the illusion sovereign so that he could not take care of Xiao Han and Tang Tang. At this time, an attack that contained the power of precepts swept up the light of particles and fell on Xiao Han and Tang Tang's heads. Apart from the Tianluan cultivator who was confronting the illusion sovereign, there were also 2 Nirvana realm cultivators who had condensed precept. Facing the Nirvana realm cultivators, Xiao Han's beautiful face turned pale. The one who attacked was no weaker than the sunset battle god. They were not even on the same level. Even Tang Tang was trembling. He was suppressed by the opponent and lost the ability to move. Their cultivation was too low. Buzz! A sword light pierced through the space and descended. Just as Xiao Han and Tang Tang were about to be swallowed by the Nirvana realm cultivator's light particles, this sword seemed to break through the clouds. It easily pierced through the opponent's will of Wei and pierced through the heads of the 2 Nirvana realm cultivators who attacked. Immediately, the sword light turned back and turned into an abundant sword will, enveloping Xiao Han and Tang Tang. This scene shocked many cultivators who were watching the battle. What a powerful sword will! Not only did the 2 Nirvana realm cultivators not react, but even the Tianluan cultivator who was confronting the illusion sovereign did not notice. This sword light seemed to have flown from far away. It ignored the heavenly path and directly descended, killing his 2 subordinate. Phew! Xiao Han breathed a sigh of relief. She was enveloped in the sword light. Feeling the faint heat, her frightened heart finally calmed down. Just now, she and Tang Tang had accompanied the illusion sovereign to go shopping. Suddenly, a Tianluan cultivator came out of nowhere and angrily accused them of stealing treasures. He did not allow any explanation and directly attacked them. The illusion sovereign was restrained, and she and Tang Tang almost died in the hands of the Nirvana realm emperor. In the air, the Tianluan cultivator in front of Huan Zun looked at the corpses of the two Nirvana cultivators. He looked ice-cold. Immediately after, he looked in a certain direction and saw two silhouettes appear in front of him in the blink of an eye. "Are you okay?" Qin Hao and Wuk floated next to the illusion sovereign. They lowered their heads and asked. Their faces were pale, scarier than when they were in the Battle of Sunset. "Fortunately, you guys came quickly." Xiao Han forced a smile, indicating that she was okay. However, she was frightened. Life and death were only in an instant. "What did they steal from you?" Qin Hao faced the man in the green robe. He was able to restrain the illusion sovereign with just his divine will. Obviously, this person was not bound by the heavenly path of Kunlun. He was a divine path cultivator of the Kunlun continent. Jackals of the same tribe. "Why are you talking nonsense? Die." The green-robed man's robe fluttered, and in an instant, a loud whistling sound rang out. The light particles that filled the sky rushed towards Qin Hao in an attempt to kill the illusion elder, Wu Kei, and the other two. "Open for me!" the illusion sovereign shouted. Tianluan divine power flowed through his body. There was an explosion in the space where he was. He broke free from the opponent's divine will. His 5 fingers shot out a claw shadow that strangely penetrated the particles in the sky, aiming for the throat of the man in the green robe. His lack of protection had almost cost Xiao Han his life. He had already lost face for the illusion sovereign. Qin Hao had personally come here. If he did not perform well, then he would be ashamed of the promise he had made to Qin Hao. How could he be the future space god of the divine wilderness? Space god power. The man in the green robe revealed a touch of surprise. Space god wheels were rare, and they could often create unexpected results. Unfortunately, this old man's Tianluan was too damaged. Furthermore, he was fighting under Kunlun's heavenly Tao, so his starting point was much weaker. The man in the green robe did not panic. 2 rays of light bloomed in his eyes, and a god intent swept out. The illusion sovereign's claw shadow collapsed midway, disappearing into thin air. Bang! The green light particles bombarded. The space in front of the illusion sovereign seemed to have turned into an invisible chi wall. Both sides' god power collided, causing a circle of turbulent ripples. Immediately, the illusion sovereign took a few steps back, and a trace of blood seeped out from his white beard. "In Kunlun's heavenly Tao, your god power is suppressed by 40%, and you still have the guts to fight me? How dare you?" The man in the green robe mocked. "Why don't you kneel before me and be my god servant? Perhaps I can save your life." Senior. Wuk was shocked. The heavenly Tao's suppression in different planes was so serious. Although their cultivation was the same, the illusion sovereign was not his opponent. "It's fine," the illusion sovereign said lightly, staring coldly at the man in the green robe. "If we were in the space world, you would not be my opponent either." Relying on the heavenly Tao's power was not something to brag about. Unfortunately, this is Kunlun. The man in the green robe raised his palm and pressed down. A huge green palm print suddenly appeared in the void, covering the illusion sovereign's head. It shone with a dazzling light as it slammed down heavily. The illusion sovereign's god intent radiated out, extending into the boundless space, trying to resonate with Kunlun's heavenly Tao and control the space Tao of this world. However, his god intent could not reach the Kunlun's heavenly Tao. It was as if the heavenly Tao did not exist in this world. Seeing this, Qin Hao's sacred perfect heaven wheel quietly operated in his body. Soon, his god intent had a subtle resonance with the Kunlun continent's will. A faint god intent attached to his clothes, emitting a noble aura. "Illusion sovereign." Qin Hao spat out a word. His god intent flowed like a stream and poured into the illusion sovereign's soul. The illusion sovereign's body suddenly trembled, and his eyes lit up. Vaguely, he could sense the existence of Kunlun's heavenly Tao. Chapter 1979. Different planes had different attributes and wills. The reason why the illusion elder was suppressed by the green-robed man was that his incomplete Tianluan could not sense Kunlun's way of the heavens, so he could not control the power of this space. His combat power was limited. However, Qin Hao used the perfect Tianluan to communicate with the way of the heavens and instilled the divine will into the illusion elder. Through Qin Hao's divine will, he could faintly sense Kunlun's way of the heavens. Although the sense was very weak, he could truly touch the will of space. Buzz. Above the illusion elder's body, a layer of divine light swirled. It grew stronger and stronger. At this time, his temperament also changed. The divine power surging in the Tianluan kept rolling and faintly began to grow stronger. The aura he emitted had the pressure of a God-state elite. The green-robed man seemed to have noticed something. His face showed a touch of surprise. Divine light flowed on his body, and a broken Tianluan appeared. The green divine power roared along with the Tianluan and gathered in his palm again. He slammed it toward the illusion elder. The light particles were like raging waves, trying to flatten everything. Illusion Zun shouted, and the image around him became distorted. His sky will could already control this space, and its range was gradually expanding. Through the divine will that Qin Hao had instilled into him, he was trying his best to absorb the space will of Tao City. He punched out and his fist collided with his opponent. Ripples spread out, and Illusion Zun's body swayed a few more steps before he stood firm. What's going on? The green-robed man was puzzled. Just now, he had injured the old man and made him spit out blood. Now that his divine power had increased, the power of the Tianluan was even stronger. Although the old man was also shaken back a few steps, he did not continue to be injured. You're just SOSO. After the illusion elder stood firm, his momentum increased greatly. With Qin Hao's divine will, he could actually sense Kunlun's will of the heavens and gradually absorb the power of space to strengthen the Tianluan's divine power. One more move and I'll make you kneel, the man in the green robe said coldly. His palms changed and formed layers of seals. The combination of divine power and divine power made the sky above Tao City dark clouds and the ground tremble. Huan Zun took a step forward and unexpectedly took the initiative to attack. His palms overlapped and suddenly parted towards the green-robed man. Boom! The space violently shook. A terrifying power like a sharp blade slashed towards the left and right side of the green-robed man's face. The space was distorted as if it was about to be split in half. The green-robed man felt as if his body was about to be torn apart, as if his body was being forcefully pulled to both sides by a strange spatial force. His expression couldn't help but change. He spat out a vigorous voice and suddenly pressed his palms down, causing the Tianluan to erupt with dazzling brilliance. Bang! A startled cry sounded in front of the green-robed man. Then, as if he had suffered a heavy impact, he staggered back a few steps in a row. He was in a sorry state. How is this possible? You can actually control the spatial energy of the heavenly Tao? Shock appeared on the azure-robed man's face, and he was no longer as calm as before. Hee. Huan Zun didn't explain. This person had inexplicably framed them and wanted to kill them. There was no need to talk nonsense with him. He once again moved forward. Under the pressure of his 5 fingers, the space was distorted. The young man felt as if there was a powerful hand descending from the sky, trying to pinch his head and twist him into a fried dough twist. A heavy pressure squeezed his body from all directions. The blood in the green-robed man's body flowed uncontrollably. Tiny drops of blood and sweat flowed out from the pores of his body. The color of his green robe became even darker. He couldn't help but let out a groan as if he was suffering a great pain. Then, with a boom, a violent shock hit his soul. The green-robed man opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was on the verge of collapse, and he almost knelt in front of Huan Zun. Impossible! You can control the spatial energy of Kunlun's heavenly Tao. If it was just a feeling before, then this pressure was even more intense. The green-robed man clearly realized that his opponent was no longer bound by Kunlun's heavenly Tao. Not only that, Huan Zun was also controlling the spatial energy of the surrounding area. The range of his spiritual sense was getting larger and larger, and the will of the heavenly Tao was integrated into the Tianluan's divine power. Why was this happening? The green-robed man couldn't figure it out. He was Kunlun's heavenly Tao expert, and the old man was an outsider. The more they fought, the more he felt as if he didn't belong to Kunlun's heavenly Tao. The old man was the god here, and was favored by the will of the heavenly Tao. Qin Hao looked at the green-robed man's expression, as if he was questioning his life. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. If there was enough time, he had a 90% chance of inheriting the will of the heavenly Tao and becoming the ruler of Kunlun. But now, he could only control the heavenly Tao of this island. Take another move from the old man, Huan Zun shouted. The strength of his Tianluan was closely related to Qin Hao. The deeper the integration between Qin Hao and Kunlun's heavenly Tao, the greater the range of space he could control, and the stronger the power he could borrow. Wasn't the green-robed man very powerful just now? He was so strong that he vomited blood and even made him a god slave. Now let's see who will be the slave. Huan Zun stretched out his hand, and under the control of the heavenly Tao, the entire space above the void changed shape. Suddenly, muffled thunder rumbled, as if a terrifying giant hand had covered the entire island. That pressure made the green-robed man's heart tremble violently. Heavenly Tao! He faintly felt a trace of heavenly Tao descending. After the fall of Zihua Exalted, there were no Tianluan realm experts who could dominate Kunlun's heavenly Tao. Today, did he see a ghost? Leave. Since his attack failed, he decisively escaped. The green-robed man had failed this time, and couldn't complete his mission anymore. At least, it was difficult for him to defeat Huan Zun now. If he couldn't suppress his opponent's Tianluan, how could he continue to kill people? Want to leave? Qin Hao's eyes turned cold. Do you think it's that easy to kill and leave when you want to? With a shift of his mind, the great void sword appeared. A flash of emerald light rolled up a bloody flame-like divine light, and suddenly pierced into the sky, stabbing toward the green-robed man's back. The green-robed man sensed the terrifying sword intent coming from behind. At this moment, Huan Zun dominated the entire space of the island again, and the faint power of heavenly Tao suppressed him. All the exits in all directions seemed to be sealed in an instant. The green-robed man couldn't help but feel a piercing chill in his heart. Would he die today? Dong. Just as the green-robed man was about to turn around and fight to the death, a figure appeared, and a powerful fist light was thrown out. The light particles from the fist light broke the momentum of the great void sword, and the divine sword spun backward, floating beside Qin Hao. Someone accidentally intervened in the battle and disrupted Qin Hao's heavenly Tao, thus cutting off the connection with the heavenly Tao. In the next moment, the falling pressure suddenly dissipated, and Huan Zun's Tianluan light weakened, revealing a stunned expression. Lin Xian. Wuk stared in front of him. He saw that beside the purple-robed man, a group of people were flying in the air. The strong man who broke the great void sword was the man from the Lin family who had threatened them at the exit of the divine workshop. He was also in the Tianluan realm. Why did you do this? Lin Xian shouted at Qin Hao with a superior attitude. You should ask him first. Qin Hao pointed at the purple-robed man expressionlessly. Mr. Lin, I suspect that they stole my treasure, the purple-robed man said. The purple-robed man said. His panicked heart calmed down as Lin Xian arrived. Suspect? Qin Hao stared at him. Did he want to kill Xiao Han just because of a suspicion? Did you find the thing? Lin Xian ignored Qin Hao and asked the purple-robed man. No, no. The purple-robed man lowered his head. He didn't kill the target, but put himself in danger and drew out Lin Xian. It was not good to continue. Qing Zun is my protector. There must be some misunderstanding between us. Let's end this matter here. Lin Xian said to Qin Hao. Misunderstanding? Qin Hao looked at Lin Xian, amused. With a single word of misunderstanding, he poisoned the tea, intending to poison him and Wuk to death, killing them without leaving a trace. Lin Xian sent a strong man in the Tianlun realm to kill Xiao Han and Tang just because of a misunderstanding? If Qin Hao hadn't learned a set of space sword control technique in the Dongwang realm and stopped it in time, he might have lost his wife. Lin Xian just said that it was a misunderstanding and it was over? Was it over? Who do you think you are? Wuk shouted. Lin Xian looked at Wuk with a gloomy look and said with a cold smile, What do you want? What could they do? One of my divine medicines was stolen by this person, and he took it to strengthen his Tianlun. The strong man in the Tianlun realm of Kunlun is so immoral, doing such despicable things. I have never seen such a shameless person. Huan Zun, take him down and kill him, Qin Hao said. His divine will and Kunlun heavenly Tao converged and poured into Huan Zun. Suddenly, the dim Tianlun on Huan Zun shone again, and the light became more and more dazzling. He shouted and rushed toward the purple-robed man. Nonsense! The purple-robed man felt his scalp go numb. He was a strong man in the divine path, and he had never done such despicable things. Huan Zun ignored him completely. His Tianlun exploded and the space roared. Presumptuous! The strong man from the Lin clan shouted. Divine power flowed through his body, and he wanted to help the man in the green robe kill Huan Zun. Go! Qin Hao moved his mind, and the great void sword appeared in front of the strong man from the Lin clan. Spatial sword technique. The strong man from the Lin clan was shocked. Such a fast sword technique. Although Qin Hao's cultivation was not high, and he was only in the Nirvana realm who had condensed the precepts, this sword was able to affect the Tianlun realm. The strong man from the Lin clan did not have time to help. He grabbed the great void sword with his palm covered in precepts. However, as soon as he touched it, there was a terrible burning power. The precepts in his hand were burned, and the great void sword spun quickly and pierced his cheek. It left a wound on his bone, and half of his face was bleeding. You! The strong man from the Lin clan was so shocked that his heart was beating wildly. If he had not tilted his head slightly, this sword might have pierced through his skull and killed him. A small Nirvana realm cultivator had such terrifying spatial sword technique. Li Chuji, do you know what you are doing? Lin Xian shouted with a cold face. Attacking the Lin clan? Under the heavenly Tao of Kunlun? Huan Zun, don't hold back. Qin Hao did not care about Lin Xian at all, just like how the other party did not care about his feelings. He pointed his finger, and the great void sword turned back and stabbed the strong man from the Lin clan. Although he could not activate the Tianlun realm to release divine power, Qin Hao could use the imperial sword technique to entangle the strong man from the Lin clan so that he could not take care of the man in the green robe. Death was only a matter of time. This was the price they had to pay for attacking Xiao Han. Chapter 1980. Kill. Lin Xian ordered heavily. The tea was poisoned and framed. He wanted to get rid of these people secretly and let them die without knowing why. Now that they openly resisted, there was no need to hide. He could directly kill them. Offending the Lin clan meant death. Under Lin Xian's order, the people accompanying him erupted with powerful auras and killing intent. The Lin clan expert who had been stabbed stepped towards Qin Hao. The illusion sovereign and the green-robed man were entangled together. In addition, Lin Xian had brought many experts and they all surrounded Xiao Han, Wuk, and Craze Tang. Since he was going to do it, he had to kill them all. In the distance, many powerful auras were alarmed. Most of them came to watch the show. After all, it was rare to see a battle between Heavenly Wheel Realm experts. Moreover, it was a life and death battle. The killing intent that erupted here attracted many famous people. Qin Xiaohe also came. Surrounded by many fairies, she quietly watched the battle and did not intervene. She also wanted to see if Qin Hao was really related to the martial god. If he was, even Lin Xian might not be able to shake this group of people. The Lin clan was used to being arrogant and despotic in Kunlun. The three Shinto families should be weakened. Boom! The illusion sovereign and the green-robed man fought fiercely. The void was about to be shattered by their heavenly wheel. With the help of the divine intent transmitted by Qin Hao, the illusion sovereign could clearly sense the heavenly Tao and control the power of space more freely. "Remember my name, Lin Rui," the Lin clan expert said coldly to Qin Hao. The heavenly wheel bloomed from his body, and a huge flame lizard phantom appeared. Its scales were incomparably red, like a monster that had crawled out of a river of blood. As he punched, the flame lizard opened its mouth and spat out a terrifying wave of fire that covered Qin Hao. The sea of fire surged and the temperature suddenly rose. "I never remember nameless scoundrels," Qin Hao replied indifferently. His eyes swept towards Xiao Han and Craze Tang. Among the many people besieging them, there were 4 Nirvana Realm experts. The Lin clan was indeed worthy of being one of Kunlun's Shinto families. So far, how many Nirvana Realm experts had there been in the Divine Wilderness? Awu and Wuk were just 2 people. One of the Divine Path families on the Kunlun continent could easily dispatch 4 Nirvanas. Including the 3 he had killed in the tea house, Lin Xian had brought 7 Nirvanas with him today. Moreover, this person was only a direct descendant of the Lin family. How many Heavenly Wheel Realm experts and Nirvana Realm experts were there in the Lin people? Just thinking about it made one's scalp go numb. In that case, how many powerhouses did the other 2 Divine Tao aristocratic families have? What about the Kunlun Sea, which was above the 3 great Shinto aristocratic families? The Heavenly Oyster Realm was indeed worthy of being called a top-notch realm. Within the realm of Kunlun, there were probably no less than 10 Heavenly Chakra Realm experts. It was probably only during the primordial spirit era of the Divine Wilderness continent that they could compare with Kunlun. In the primordial spirit era, there were 14 Heavenly Wheels, 7 Demon Kings, and millions of emperors. Nirvana Realm experts were estimated to be no less than 1,000. That was truly an incomparably glorious era. Taking back his thoughts, Qin Hao directly ignored Lin Rui's attack with his mind. The great void sword broke through the air and rushed toward the many masters of the Lin clan. He was not afraid of Lin Rui, but Xiao Han and Quang Tong were powerless against Nirvana Realm experts. "Leave one for me," Wuk shouted loudly. He was afraid that he would be killed by Qin Hao's sword. He took out the divine sword of the Iron King of Divine Workshop and rushed forward to kill one of the Nirvana Realm experts. Unexpectedly, he also took the initiative to attack. The spectators were stunned. Whoosh! The great void sword flashed over, containing a strong sword intent. Terrifying flame divine power attached to the sword edge, swallowing and spitting out terrifying destructive power. Poochie poochie sounds continued. Wherever the sword light passed, the emperors were killed on the spot. Their bodies were penetrated and burned to ashes. The great void sword was originally a divine weapon. As Qin Hao entered the divine path, it was nourished by his divine power and became even more powerful. No matter how the emperors resisted, it was useless. They were directly killed by the sword and their souls were destroyed. Boom! The fire waves spat out by the giant lizard swept over. The ferocious radiance of the laws ruthlessly attacked Qin Hao's body. Under his clothes, a heavenly wheel connected to every part of his body, filling every part of his flesh and meridians. The perfect heavenly wheel emitted a divine light and took the frontal attack of the heavenly wheel expert without moving. However, Qin Hao's sword light passed through, and the crowd surrounding Xiao Han and Kuang Tong disappeared one after another. Only a few people were left. They were so shocked that they froze on the spot and did not dare to move. They did not know what had just happened. The aura of death that passed in front of them and the disappearance of their companions made the survivors sober up. If they dared to move, they would immediately evaporate. You actually... Lin Rui's expression changed drastically. Ignoring Li Chuzan's attack, Li Chuzan slashed at the many Emperor Dao experts from his clan. Other than the Nirvanas who were intercepted by Shou Wuk, there were a small number of them. Including the 3 Nirvanas, more than 10 of them were annihilated. This was simply... He is still wearing another divine artifact. What a bastard! Lin Xian shouted angrily. To be able to block a nomological law attack, Li Chuzan was definitely hiding a defensive divine artifact on his body. It's your turn. Qin Hao stared at Lin Xian. He used his mind to activate the Great Void Sword. Light instantly shot out and the sword slashed at Lin Xian's throat. Young master, be careful. Lin Rui was shocked. It was okay if others died, but he could not let anything happen to Lin Xian. He gave up on attacking and immediately blocked Lin Xian's position. Li Chuji was sinister and vicious. Lin Rui felt that he was more troublesome than fighting with a heavenly wheel expert. Shua. As soon as Lin Rui moved, the direction of the Great Void Sword changed again. It turned and flashed toward the green-robed man who was fighting with the illusion god. The green-robed man had the upper hand against the illusion god for the first time. However, this advantage gradually turned into a disadvantage as Qin Hao secretly interfered. The illusion god, who could use the heavenly wheel to absorb the space power of Kunlun's heavenly path, was no longer an opponent that he could easily defeat. At this time, the two were fighting fiercely. The green-robed man did not notice that Qin Hao suddenly attacked. It was too late. The sword light was too fast. It was a sword light that crossed the heavenly path of space, as if there was no limit to it. No. A sorrowful roar sounded in the void. The green-robed man never dreamed that he, a dignified immortal of the Kunlun continent, would die under his own heavenly path. Chi. The jade-like sword shadow pierced through his chest from his back. That powerful sword will contain the power of the heavenly path. It was the power of the primeval realm's original realm. When this sword will pierce through his soul, the azure-robed man turned his head to look at Qin Hao, his face filled with pain and confusion. Pung! The old hand fell. The illusion god did not give the green-robed man a chance to speak. With a palm, he crushed the opponent's divine body. The opponent's entire body was shaken into light by his divine power. Qing Zun. Lin Xian's expression was extremely shocked. The series of changes made his mind unable to react. He never thought that a dignified heavenly wheel expert would die so easily. Or it could be said that Li Chuji's scheming was too accurate and too ruthless. Lin Rui's heart was beating very fast, fiercely shaking in his chest. The green-robed man's death had a huge impact on him. Because he was also a heavenly wheel expert, he knew that he was not much stronger than the green-robed man. Although the green-robed man was not from the Lin clan, he was willing to work for young Master Lin Xian. After all, a heavenly wheel expert was not that easy to meet. Their relationship was getting closer day by day. Today, it was Qing Zun who took the initiative to volunteer to make Lin Xian happy. Unexpectedly, before Lin Xian could be happy, Qing Zun had lost his life. Qing Zun's death had a very negative impact on young Master Lin Xian's fight for the inheritance of the family. Perhaps because of this, the old ancestor no longer valued Lin Xian and would not hand over the family business to him. At this moment, Lin Rui looked at Qin Hao and the illusion god with shock and a hint of fear. Li Chuji, a lower Nirvana realm expert, controlled a divine weapon and an external heavenly wheel expert. With such tacit understanding, he easily killed Qing Zun, a heavenly wheel expert of Kunlun. You. Lin Xian's lips trembled as he pointed at Qin Hao. He was so angry that he could not speak. What about you? Next, the one who will be killed is you. Qin Hao's eyes were incomparably cold. Killing a heavenly wheel expert was something that he did not even dare to think about before he regained his memories. However, after he regained his memories, it did not affect his state of mind too much. This was because killing a heavenly wheel expert in the immemorial realm was a common occurrence. Moreover, Qin Hao had planned this from the beginning. Everything was under his control. The green-robed man's death was inevitable. Good, you are very good today. I, Lin Xian, have opened my eyes. Lin Xian roared. His eyes were wide open, and he was extremely furious. Wanting to kill him? Boasting shamelessly. Did he really think that the descendants of the Lin clan could be killed so easily? Did he think that the Lin clan of Kunlun did not exist? Was this a humiliation? Was he looking down on the Lin clan? Qin Hao saw confidence in Lin Xian's eyes. It was confidence in himself and his family. It was as if Lin Xian did not dare to make a move, or even if he made a move, he would not be able to kill Lin Xian. However, was this really the case? Qin Hao slowly raised his sword finger. In the void, the great void sword hummed. Surrounded by red flames, it pointed in Lin Xian's direction. At this moment, the boundless space fell into silence. Countless famous people who were watching the battle witnessed the white-haired young man's strength. He had killed dozens of martial emperors of the Lin clan and killed a heavenly wheel expert with one sword move. Would he make another move? Would Lin Xian die here today? Many people were watching, and even a little expectantly. In my eyes, you are just an ant, Qin Hao said coldly. Just as he was about to make a move, a large palm leaf fan suddenly floated in front of Lin Xian. A fat figure sat on the fan, drinking wine leisurely. It was the fierce god of Kunlun, supreme god Ghost Butcher. Ha, a foreigner. How dare you attack the descendants of the aristocratic families of Kunlun? Do you really think that the heavenly wheel experts of Kunlun do not exist? Ghost Butcher drank a mouthful of wine and said to Qin Hao with a smile, "Young man, don't be too arrogant. Senior Ghost Butcher, please help me take down this person. I want them to die a horrible death." Lin Xian was overjoyed as if he had met his savior. As he spoke, he stared fiercely at Xiao Han. "Senior, you want to take the lead?" Qin Hao frowned slightly. Although Ghost Butcher also had a small heavenly wheel, he was much stronger than the man in the green robe. If they really fought, he might expose his perfect heavenly wheel. He would need to release his divine power. Chapter 1981. No, don't get me wrong. I just want to persuade the two sides to stop fighting and make peace. Of course, if young Master Lin promises a great reward, I don't mind doing it. Or you can give me an original World Divine Stone, and the old man will let you leave safely. It's a good deal, right? Gui Tu said with a smile. Illusion Elder's face tightened. Trying to take advantage of the situation? Senior, you really know how to take advantage of the situation. My divine stone is not that easy to take. Qin Hao's face darkened. You don't know what's good for you. Gui Tu scolded and looked at Lin Xian. What do you think, young Master Lin? Senior Gui Tu, just do it. I'll thank you later. Lin Xian's eyes were filled with killing intent. After thinking for a short while, he made up his mind to kill Qin Hao. Deal. Gui Tu said with satisfaction. The terrifying light of the sky will burst out, drowning the void. It was extremely terrifying. Qin Hao and Illusion Elder were on high alert. Gui Tu was not someone the cyan-robed man could compare to. For a moment, The atmosphere was suffocating again. Everyone, please stop. At this moment, a voice was heard, ignoring Gui Tu's burst of might and clearly reaching everyone's ears. Gui Tu and Lin Xian were stunned. Then, they looked over and saw a group of graceful figures walking in the air. Their clothes fluttered in the wind, and their aura was strong. Every woman was beautiful. They were the disciples of the Kunlun Sea, and the leader was Lotus Fairy. In an instant, Gui Tu's pressure stopped as Qin Xiao entered. Qin Hao and the others also looked over. What do you mean? Lin Xian asked. Why did you stop them? The death anniversary of Exalted Zihua is approaching, and the grand event of the Kunlun Sea is about to begin. Everyone who comes is a guest. Young Master Lin and Young Master Li, can you give us some face and let today's matter end here? If anything happens to you because of this event, won't it be the fault of the Kunlun Sea? Qin Xiaohe looked at Qin Hao and Lin Xian. So, where it's possible to make mistakes, let them go. Isn't it better to take the opportunity in the event? Lin Xian's eyes darkened. Stop here? Why didn't Qin Xiaohe stop Qing Zun when he died? Now that Gui Tu wanted to help him get rid of Li Chuji, Kunlun Hai was meddling in other people's business. Was he doing this on purpose? Lin Zhu is one of the 3 great gods of Kunlun, and his fame is widespread. Presumably, he doesn't want the Lin people to become enemies with the experts of other continents. Young Master Lin is just one of the successors of the Lin people, right? Qin Xiaohe said with a smile. She secretly glanced at Qin Hao. Judging from his performance just now, Li Chuji must be related to the martial god. Ordinary divine artifacts couldn't withstand the impact of the heavenly wheel rule and would be affected to some extent. Li Chuji's breathing was steady and he wasn't injured at all. The divine armor on his body was obviously very strong. I'll give you face and not attack him before the exalted venerable worship day. I'll let him live for a few more days, but I can't guarantee that he can leave Kunlun alive. Humph! Lin Xian flung his sleeves and left with his people. Not long after, he turned back and shouted, Senior Gui Tu, if you don't have anything else to say, why don't you come with me? Qing Zun is dead, and I need a helper. If you are willing to come, we can share the opportunity equally. My pleasure. Gui Tu smiled. It was naturally beneficial for him to enter the festival with the help of the Lin people. When he passed by Qin Hao, Gui Tu said, Young man, old man's words still count. Give me some original world divine stones, and I can guarantee that you can leave Kunlun safely. Otherwise, haha, the Lin family is very vengeful. Senior, you don't have to worry about that, Qin Hao said coldly. Gui Tu made a gesture as if to say to Qin Hao, You've got guts. Then, he chased after Lin Xian's team. Li Chuji, the Lin people are a top family in Kunlun. Patriarch Lin's cultivation is even stronger than Gui Tu's. Ordinary heavenly wheel rule can't compete with him. The senior beside you can't stop him at all. Now that Lin Xian wants to kill you, I'm afraid that this trip will be very dangerous for you. Qin Xiaohe kindly reminded him. My life is tough. Qin Hao smiled, as if he didn't take it to heart. If he wanted to leave, the Lin family couldn't stop him. Your relationship with the martial god seems to be very special. How about this? When the festival starts, if your performance is outstanding enough, I'm willing to put in a good word for you in front of the sect master. If the sect master is willing to come forward, he may be able to protect young Master Li, Qin Xiaohe said calmly. Qin Xiaohe said in a calm tone. She was not giving alms, but treating him like a friend. Qin Hao knew how strong Lin Xian's killing intent was today. It was impossible for him to let them leave Kunlun. In this case, he needed to rely on other forces. The Kunlun Sea was a sect controlled by the former way of heaven. Although it had declined, its foundation was still above the 3 major families. If the master of the Kunlun Sea was willing to come forward to protect Qin Hao, even Patriarch Lin would have to be careful. Thank you for your reminder, Fairy. I'll do my best. Qin Hao said. He came to the Kunlun continent for the divine Tao power of the exalted Zihua. If he could control the Kunlun heavenly Tao, he wouldn't be afraid of the Lin family. By then, the other two major families and the Kunlun Sea would have to respect him. He wouldn't need to rely on the master of the Kunlun Sea. However, Qin Hao wouldn't tell Qin Xiaohe these words directly. She might think he was stupid. The Kunlun heavenly Tao was almost impossible to be controlled by anyone, unless the immortal Lord Tian Yong pointed out the controller. Good, I'm looking forward to your performance. Qin Xiaohe could see that Qin Hao was very confident and proud. She hoped that he could bring some surprises when the festival started. It was unlikely that he could succeed the divine Tao will of the exalted Zihua. In all these years, no one had reached that step. She only cared about the martial god behind Qin Hao. It wouldn't be bad for the Kunlun Sea to make friends with a master comparable to the immortal Lord Realm for the sect master. I'll take my leave. Qin Xiaohe nodded at Qin Hao and glanced at Shou Wuk silently. Then, she led her people back to the Heaven Lake Divine Land on the colorful cloud. Shou Wuk's body emitted an aura that intoxicated her. It was a mysterious feeling. Unfortunately, she didn't see anything special about him in the battle just now. Maybe it was just her imagination. You little brat, spring is here. Qin Hao touched Wuk with his arm. Wuk's body trembled slightly. He put on a serious face and said, "What nonsense are you talking about?" It was impossible for him and Qin Xiaohe to be together. She was the fairy of the Kunlun Sea and a master of the immortal Tao who had forged the heavenly wheel. He was just a nobody. At least for now, Wuk was still too far away from the immortal Tao. He knew his own limitations and didn't dare to expect anything. In love, even the most outstanding person will feel inferior. Qin Hao shook his head and mourned silently. But you're an exception. Xiao Han curled her lips. She had never seen Qin Hao feel inferior in front of her. He was always so overbearing. While chatting, the group flew away and found a palace to stay in. From today on, the grudge between him and Lin Xian was irreconcilable. Next, he would have to either seize the immortal Tao power of Zihua or run away from Kunlun at the risk of being killed by the Lin people. However, these two choices were very difficult for Qin Hao. Except for Xiao Han and the others, no one believed that he could control the heavenly Tao of Kunlun. As for running away, to be honest, it was very embarrassing. If Zhan Wu knew about it when he returned to the Divine Land, he would definitely laugh his head off. After Qin Hao and the others left, the storm calmed down temporarily. However, the commotion it caused was getting bigger and bigger. Dozens of immortal Tao experts of the Lin family were killed and a heavenly wheel expert was killed. This made many famous people feel uneasy and even felt like they were dreaming. The man in the green robe wasn't a nobody. After all, he was a local immortal Tao expert in Kunlun. There weren't many people like him on the continent. The three immortal Tao families and the Kunlun Sea only had a dozen of them in total. Qin Hao had just arrived in Kunlun when he killed a local heavenly wheel expert. His spatial sword control technique left a deep impression on many people who watched the battle. Unfortunately, such a talent would probably die in the hands of the Lin people. Lin Xian wouldn't let them go. Meanwhile, in a luxurious restaurant, there were two young men sitting in an elegant private room. Both of them had extraordinary auras, and there was a row of experts with powerful auras surrounding the room. They were standing respectfully, protecting the two of them. Is it because of that person that the god of the East expelled you from the Donghuang realm? A young man in white exuded a natural and unrestrained aura. He slowly poured a cup of wine and drank the tea elegantly. He looked at the young man opposite him with a smile. Although the young man sitting opposite him also exuded a superior aura, compared to the young man in white, he seemed to be much more depressed. At this moment, Higashua looked through the window of the private room and saw Qin Hao and the others leave. Blue veins appeared on his fists, and the cup on the table shook uneasily because of his anger. Li Chuji. I didn't expect him to come to the Kunlun continent. Higashua clenched his teeth. Not only did the person who harmed him come, but the illusion god also came with him. Could it be that the illusion god betrayed the god of the East? Young master, I've asked around. This group has the original boundary divine stone. According to the disciples of the Kunlun Sea, it seems to be related to the martial god. A middle-aged expert behind the young man in white stepped forward and leaned over to whisper a few words in his ear. Related to the martial god, interesting. The young man in white froze for a moment and then smiled. Higashua didn't seem to hear him. From the moment he saw Qin Hao, he seemed to have lost his soul. There was only killing intent in his eyes. Did you hear that? He is related to the martial god. Listen to my advice, don't provoke this person. The young man in white saw Higashua's expression and couldn't help but warn him seriously. Brother Liu, Higashua pleaded. The young man in white waved his hand. For the sake of my aunt, I won't provoke Li Chuji. I'm still your brother. If I get involved in any disputes with this person, don't blame me for being ruthless. Higashua immediately lowered his head, disheartened. Lu Qiu saw this and sighed silently. If it were someone else, it would be fine. He could step forward and settle the matter for Higashua, or even kill him. Li Chuji was related to the martial god and seemed to be his disciple. As someone from the Sword Dao world, how could Lu Qiu not know what kind of expert the martial god was? He was a supreme figure who had defeated many sword gods. He had forged a perfect heaven wheel and his divine power reached the heavens. Although he had lost to his father by a small margin, Lu Qiu knew very well what level the martial god was at. He was definitely at the quasi-divine master level. Lu Qiu's father had even said that in the near future, even he wouldn't be a match for the martial god. The martial god's heaven wheel was too domineering, but his divine power foundation was slightly weaker. There was still a lot of room for improvement. Thus, after that battle, Lu Qiu became the martial god's disciple in name and was forced to kneel down and worship the martial god. Unfortunately, the martial god had only given him a disciple in name and hadn't taught him the 9-palace battle divine skill. That was a divine skill that Lu Qiu yearned for. Li Chuji seemed to be the martial god's disciple in secret. In that case, Lu Qiu and Li Chuji were brothers in name. How could he help Higashua deal with his junior brother? Lu Qiu understood this common sense. Moreover, even if he didn't care about common sense, he couldn't get past his master. If he dared to make a move and the martial god found out that he had dealt with his junior brother, the old man would get angry and the entire sword world would suffer. Chapter 1982. Wulin Chinese Network Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation 10,000 flowers bloom. The venerated day of the venerated Lord was getting closer and closer. The Kunlun Sea was busy preparing for the venerated ancestors' ceremony. During this period of time, all the cities were peaceful. Lin Xian did not continue to cause trouble for Qin Hao. Qin Hao and the others stayed in the palace and cultivated in peace, honing their spatial sword arts. In the previous battle, Qin Hao had used a sword art that could traverse space, catching the experts under Lin Xian off guard and causing heavy casualties. Its power could be said to be unparalleled. The illusion sovereign came from the Dongwang realm, and the spatial Tao was his divine power. With the illusion sovereign's help, Qin Hao's spatial sword arts became more exquisite and ingenious, making Wuk extremely envious. Gradually, everyone, including Xiao Han, began to learn this sword art. Due to their cultivation level, the effects were not as good as Qin Hao's ideal. However, everyone enjoyed it and immersed themselves in their cultivation. Soon, as time passed, the Kunlun Grand Festival arrived as scheduled. On this day, the entire Kunlun realm was filled with vitality. The experts from the outside world stationed on the islands gathered at the Kunlun Sea, and the scene was magnificent. The sky, the ground, and the sea were filled with countless figures of martial artists and monsters of various races. The venerated Wang Gate was the entrance to the festival. A huge white stone arch stood above the divine sea, carved with dragons and phoenixes. Spiritual energy lingered around it, and it was extremely shocking. Countless experts gathered at the venerated Wang Gate, and at a glance, it was as if they covered the entire sea, filling up the Kunlun Sea. The experts from the various realms adjacent to the Heaven's Eye realm were gathered here, and one could imagine how magnificent it was. The weakest cultivator here was in the Tao validation realm. Qin Hao and the others had also arrived, and they quietly waited in the crowd. Wuk looked at the experts and exclaimed in his heart, "If this scene were to be transmitted back to the divine wilderness and seen by the sovereigns of the 4 regions and 5 realms, how would they feel?" Every single person gathered here was a 1 in a million monarch. Of course, no matter how many there were, it was only a small part of the wilderness. The myriad world was too vast, and there were countless heavenly wheel experts like Qin Hao. In the past, Wuk would never have imagined that the world outside the divine wilderness would be so terrifying. It's a once-in-a-thousand-years event. Rumor has it that a group of extraordinary figures will emerge in every event. This time, you will definitely be one of them. The illusion elder looked at Qin Hao, his eyes full of expectation. The monstrous geniuses present today all had strong backgrounds, and their talents could be said to be unparalleled. However, there were only a few people who could truly stand out from the crowd. No, he will become the most eye-catching one. He will definitely be one of a kind, Wuk added. The illusion elder smiled and nodded. At this moment, in front of the Wangzuan Gate, a group of figures flew out from the inside of the giant stone gate and floated in front of the experts. In front of them was a beautiful fairy. Her aura was not much weaker than Qin Xiaohe's, but she gave off a noble and cold feeling. Her beautiful eyes looked around at the experts from various realms, and she said in a clear voice, "After 1,000 years of reincarnation, the Kunlun Grand Event has attracted everyone. Today, my sect is open to the public. There are countless opportunities of the divine path hidden within. If you have the ability to obtain them, they will all belong to you. Now, everyone may enter the venue." "Thank you, Fairy." The experts from various realms responded politely. They had crossed over and risked their lives to pass through the wilderness just to borrow the opportunities of the Kunlun Sea sect to increase their strength. Although they were guests today, they were essentially asking for help, so they should give the Kunlun Sea sufficient respect. At this moment, a powerful fluctuation appeared in the Wangzuan Gate. A curtain of light converged from the bottom to the top, and the enchantment opened. Immediately, the experts from various realms walked forward and entered the Kunlun Sea through the giant gate. Everything was in order, and no one disturbed the order. The opportunities of the divine path were placed in the Kunlun Sea, and they would not disappear for no reason. Only those with enough ability could obtain them. If one's cultivation was not high enough, they could not take them away. Therefore, there was not much difference between those who entered first and those who entered last. "Let's go," Qin Hao said. Xiao Han, Wuk, Illusion Elder, and Tang followed behind. The moment they stepped through the giant gate, they suddenly felt that their minds were opened, and a heroic spirit was born. This divine gate had the effect of cleansing one's mind. "Lin Xian has already entered. Be careful." Inside the Wangzuan Gate, many Kunlun Sea fairies were present, and Qin Xiaohe was among them. She still looked outstanding. When she saw Qin Hao and the others in the crowd, she secretly transmitted her voice. Qin Hao glanced at Qin Xiaohe and nodded silently. "She takes special care of us." Does she have ulterior motives? Wuk asked. Qin Hao chuckled. Don't always think that others have ulterior motives for approaching us. Fairy, he does treat us well, but to say that she has ulterior motives is a bit too much. What did they have that was worthy of the attention of a direct disciple of the Kunlun Sea? The divine stone of the original realm? A perfect divine stone of the heavenly path was precious, but it was not unique in the world. In the untainted land there were many divine objects that came out of the Archean realm. For a mere divine stone, Qin Xiaohe did not lower herself to curry favor. If she had ulterior motives, it was probably the martial god. Qin Hao did not think that Qin Xiaohe had done anything wrong. Any external force with a strong background was worth making friends with. This was normal. The Kunlun Sea was the same. Sure enough, not long after entering, Qin Hao saw Lin Xian in another direction. Compared to a few months ago, Lin Xian's entourage was even larger. There were no less than a few hundred people. Perhaps he had transferred a group of people from his family, or perhaps he had roped in experts from other planes. Gui too was among them. Lin Xian also saw Qin Hao. With a smile, he gestured a beheading gesture. Then, he led a large group of people into the depths of the Kunlun Sea sect. Seeing Lin Xian's actions, Qin Xiaohe knew that Lin Xian had not let go of the previous incident. Even if she tried to mediate, the Lin clan would not give her face. Faintly, it seemed that Lin Xian still had a grudge against her. Qin Xiaohe did not care. She was a member of the Kunlun Sea, the disciple of the sect leader, and a heavenly wheel expert. No matter how arrogant Lin Xian was, he could not do anything to her. As long as the Kunlun Sea did not collapse, the Lin clan would not be able to touch her. I wonder if the Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor will bloom for someone today, Qin Xiaohe said with a smile. Junior sister, what are you laughing at? Footsteps sounded. It was the cold goddess who had walked over from the gate of reverence. Senior sister Su, do you want to take a look at the Sea of Flowers together? Qin Xiaohe asked. Sure, Su Qian said with a smile. The Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor was the first holy land of the sect. The Lotus Pond had a spirit that contained a wisp of the will of the Kunlun Sea. It could sense the talent of the cultivators. In the past, every group of cultivators who crossed the Lotus Pond would trigger the Sea of Flowers, causing hundreds of lotuses to bloom. Some even caused tens of thousands of flowers to bloom. However, the Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor had never bloomed for one person. Today should not be an exception. Qin Hao followed the flow of people. The deeper he went, the more he felt that the interior of the Kunlun Sea was like a paradise. The spiritual qi was incomparably pure. It was so pure that even a breath could stimulate a reaction of the divine wheel. For imperial cultivators, their comprehension would probably be even more intense. In front of them, there was a majestic heavenly lake surrounded by water. Countless lotuses were planted around it. It was the heavenly lake where the lotus goddess had entertained the cultivators not long ago. However, Qin Hao noticed that the lotuses in the heavenly lake were all closed. It was not like the first time he came here, when he could occasionally see some places blooming. Today, the heavenly lake was dead silent. It was as if it had fallen asleep. The heavenly lake contains the will of the Kunlun Sea. Every flower in the Sea of Flowers contains the heavenly path. It is said that the Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor was personally planted by the exalted Zihua. It has a spirit with its master. I wonder which genius can use the will of the great path to make the Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor bloom, someone said with a laugh. The water in the heavenly lake was the divine water of the Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor. All the flowers were the children of the Flower Emperor. It was not difficult to make the lotuses bloom. The difficult part was to make the Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor bloom at the same time. It was because the Heavenly Lake Flower Emperor was a divine flower planted by the exalted Zihua. It had listened to the teachings of the exalted Zihua and developed a consciousness. Unless it met a transcendent figure who was comparable to the exalted Zihua, it could not be touched. I didn't expect it to have such a background, Wuk said in surprise. A lotus flower had listened to the exalted Zihua's teachings and spread its seeds. It then multiplied into thousands of flowers and formed the heavenly lake. Moreover, these flowers were connected to the will of the Kunlun Sea. In that case, if the heavenly lake flower emperor bloomed, wouldn't it mean that the person had the potential comparable to the exalted Zihua? Thinking of this, Wuk looked at Qin Hao. He naturally could not make the heavenly lake flower emperor bloom. After all, Wuk's cultivation was limited. The gap between them was too big. However, Qin Hao had a chance. Qin Hao stood there quietly. He saw many people trying to communicate with the sea of flowers in the heavenly lake. Unfortunately, most of them only managed to make a few lotuses bloom. Even those who performed well could only make 70 or 80 blossoms bloom. "Do you want to try?" asked the illusion elder. Qin Hao smiled faintly. He was not in a hurry to try. It was just a sea of flowers that had gained enlightenment. So what if 10,000 flowers bloomed? It was not a big deal. At that moment, gasps of surprise could be heard from the vast crowd. Then, many gazes turned to the front, and their eyes were filled with shock. Above the dozens of water corridors in the heavenly lake, a figure floated there. The will of Wei around him surged. A faint sword-humming sound came from the void. It was as if thousands of divine swords were vibrating at the same time. In an instant, the lotuses in the dozens of water corridors shone at the same time. The petals opened one by one. The entire heavenly lake was filled with qi of heaven's might and poured into the figure. This scene stunned the cultivators from the 100 worlds. The lotuses in the heavenly lake are still blooming. Who is this person? Someone's heart trembled. He let out a deep cry. His eyes were filled with great shock. All the lotuses in the heavenly lake were like palms. They swayed toward the figure in the sky. Cheers came from the void. It was as if this figure controlled the entire heavenly lake. With a single thought, thousands of flowers bloomed. Not only were the cultivators from various worlds shocked, but Lotus Fairy and Fairy Su, who were watching from the side, were also dumbfounded. It was the first time for them to see thousands of flowers bloom in the heavenly lake. It was too spectacular. Who is he? Lin Xian pointed at the white-robed figure in shock. Below the white-robed figure stood a group of cultivators with powerful auras. Waves of sharp sword will emanated from their bodies. They seemed to be a group of supreme sword cultivators. Could he be from the sword world? Someone guessed. Zihua was very famous in the past. He was the second most powerful person in the Heaven Wall world. His cultivation was only second to Divine Lord Tianyong. It was very likely that he had reached the level of a quasi-divine lord. As one of the top worlds in the Eldritch universe, Zihua had such terrifying strength. Naturally, many people admired him. Even though he had died, many cultivators came to pay their respects on the day of his death. Among them, there were also some descendants of the divine path, who were of noble birth and kept a low profile. The white-robed young man who floated in the sky above the heavenly lake and caused thousands of flowers to bloom was probably a descendant of a supreme divine path cultivator. Chapter 1983. The divine water in the heavenly pool surged and the lotuses swayed. The rich fragrance of the flowers filled the air and spread to the entire Kunlun Sea. The white-robed figure standing in the air was peerless, making the cultivators from all over the world look like foils. It was as if the heavenly pool existed for him alone. What a powerful sword will! Wuk's voice trembled slightly as he looked at the white-robed youth in the air. The other party's sword will resonated with the heavenly pool. Every time a wisp of sword aura entered a lotus, it would immediately bloom. Now that 10,000 lotuses had bloomed, his sword will was astonishing. Ever since Wuk embarked on the path of swordsmanship, He had never been so shocked by the sword will released by a swordsman. Although the sword will released by the white-robed youth was not as pure as his, it contained everything. It was vast and boundless. The earth is indeed very strong, Qin Hao praised. He did not expect to meet such a super genius in Kunlun not long after leaving the divine wilderness. Putting aside cultivation, this person's talent was probably not below Wuck's. As for strength, there was no comparison. He had cast the heavenly wheel of the great path and was a sword god. When Wuck reached this level one day, perhaps the two of them would be able to compete. At present, Wuck was no match for this person at all. At this time, Lu Qiu's back was facing the cultivators as he floated above the heavenly pool. His body emitted a will that merged with the lotuses. Faintly, his sword will touched a trace of Kunlun's might, which shocked everyone. Unfortunately, the flower emperor, the head of all flowers, did not bloom for him. Lu Qiu did not care. After doing all this, he turned around and smiled at the crowd. Qin Hao did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that Lu Qiu's eyes lingered on him for a few more seconds. It seemed that his smile was also directed at him. Then, Lu Qiu led the cultivators of the sword world away, and went to the other holy lands of the Kunlun Sea to find opportunities. He smiled at you? Xiao Han looked at Qin Hao and suddenly had this feeling. My temperament is extraordinary. Maybe it's a coincidence, Qin Hao said strangely. He also had the same idea, but he didn't know the young man in white. There was no reason for him to smile at him on purpose. Perhaps he was attracted by his temperament and felt that he was a hero. Shameless. Xiao Han snorted. Look at this person. Wuck pointed at Lu Qiu's team. Higashiwa. Qin Hao's eyes narrowed as he saw the other party. He was Higashiwa, the son of the Dongwang supreme god. Why was he here? No wonder she smiled at you, Xiao Han said. Higashiwa and the young man in white were standing together. Their smiles were most likely malicious. Sorry to trouble you. The illusion sovereign was on high alert. This time, not only did they have to be wary of Lin Xian, but they had also bumped into Dong Bai's son. Wasn't Higashiwa exiled to a barbarian land by the god of the East and forced to live with animals for the rest of his life? How could he blend into a group of super-powerful sword cultivators? It seemed like he was following the young man in white. Suddenly, the illusion sovereign thought of something and his expression changed. It was said that Dong Bai's wife came from a great world. Although no one knew exactly where she came from, on the day of the wedding, God Lord Dong Huang personally came to the banquet and accepted the gift of tea from Dong Bai and his wife. This was unusual. With the nature of the god of the East, even if Dong Bai was his disciple, he wouldn't easily leave the Dong Huang palace. The reason he was willing to attend the wedding personally must be because of Dong Bai's wife. No wonder Higashiwa wasn't exiled to a barbarian land. The young man in white was related to Dong Bai's wife. The two might be of the same race. At this moment, the illusion sovereign was a little nervous, but he didn't say anything. He was just guessing and didn't want to disturb Qin Hao's mood. Right now, they should focus on obtaining the inheritance of the divine path from the exalted Zi Hua. As long as they could control the heavenly Tao of Kunlun and be given control by the heavenly Lord Tian Hao, even the god of the East couldn't do anything to them. Why should they be afraid of a young man in white? After Lu Qiu left, many people stepped into the heavenly lake and tried to awaken the lotus. However, the shocking scene of 10,000 lotuses blooming didn't happen again. Lu Qiu was the only one left. Prince of Yuandu. A group of black-clothed experts walked forward. They were recognized as coming from the Tianyuan continent. Yuandu. Qin Hao hadn't been to this place before. From the discussions of the people around him, Yuandu was a giant force in the Tianyuan continent. It wasn't inferior to the Lin family of Kunlun. A man with black hair draped over his shoulders in the crowd was the Prince of Yuandu. He was in the Nirvana realm and was only half a step away from forging the heavenly wheel. He was extremely powerful. At this moment, the Prince of Yuandu was standing in the air above the heavenly lake. Just like Lu Qiu, he emitted his will and tried to awaken the 10,000 flowers in the heavenly lake. When his aura spread out, the lotus leaves shook and the celestial lotuses bloomed one after another. Unfortunately, it wasn't as shocking as Lu Qiu. After 1,000 lotuses bloomed, they stopped. In the end, the Prince of Yuandu sighed and left. Next, many experts from large forces tried, but their performance was worse than the previous one. They didn't even surpass the Prince of Yuandu, let alone Lu Qiu. "I'll try." At this moment, Xiao Han stepped forward. Qin Hao looked at her with a smile, his eyes full of confidence. Han came from an extraordinary background. She was a descendant of the God clan. Although her current cultivation was slightly weaker, she definitely wouldn't lose to the Prince of Yuandu. As expected, Xiao Han entered the Heavenly Lake's water corridor. As the Emperor's qi spread out, the luxurious life spirit crown appeared. Nobility filled the Heavenly Lake. In an instant, many lotuses bloomed in her direction. She was like a flower fairy, stunning many people. Xiao Han bloomed more lotuses than the Prince of Yuandu. The Prince of Yuandu was in the Nirvana realm and was in the 8th level of the precept. Xiao Han was only in the True Self Emperor realm. Their cultivation was more than one level apart. Even so, she still surpassed him. This meant that her will was more perfect than his, and her potential was endless. If they were at the same level, she wouldn't just surpass him, she would absolutely crush him. Qin Hao seemed very calm. It was as if everything was supposed to be like this. Han came from the divine wilderness continent and had the perfect power of the original realm. Unfortunately, the difference in level meant that she could only do this without the heavenly wheel. Otherwise, everyone's jaws would drop. This woman is not bad. Lin Xian watched silently from the side. His eyes were filled with envy. She was stronger than the Prince of Yuandu, but her cultivation was not as good as his. This was enough to prove Xiao Han's talent. The more it was like this, the colder Lin Xian's expression became. It was as if Xiao Han should not follow Qin Hao. She should follow him. Only he, Lin Xian, was worthy of Xiao Han's love. Another figure walked forward and came to Xiao Han's side. It was Wuk. Immediately after, the flawless sword will bloomed, and a sword lotus of the great path bloomed from under his feet. Brilliant splendor shone, radiating towards the heavenly pool. Everywhere the sword light touched, lotus flowers bloomed rapidly. Very quickly, it turned into a huge sea of flowers. If one counted carefully, there were actually 9,000 flowers. The scene was quite spectacular. His sword spirit is actually a lotus. No wonder. Qin Xiaohe's state of mind was shaken. Looking at Shou Wuk in the sea of flowers, she slowly stretched out her hand. A white lotus bloomed in her palm. This was her life spirit. Her life spirit and Wuk's were of the same origin. No wonder she felt a sense of familiarity from him. It was destined. Humph! Lin Xian saw the 9,000 blooming flowers and immediately stepped forward. He leaped up and stepped on one of the lotus leaves. Instantly, the aura of the great path was released from his body. The light of the 9 planes of martial arts circled around his body. The halo of the 5 planes of martial arts rose up from his legs. At this moment, there was a continuous rustling sound. The entire heavenly lake seemed to have awakened from a deep slumber. Colorful light shot up into the sky and flooded the void. Countless celestial lotuses bloomed at the same time, swaying in unison towards Lin Xian. Even the lotuses that bloomed under Xiao Han and Wuk's will leaned toward Lin Xian at the same time. It was as if they had abandoned them and no longer moved for them. What's going on? All the celestial lotuses in the heavenly lake were in full bloom, surpassing even Lu Qiu's. The scene was indescribably magnificent. The sudden scene stunned Lin Xian. He watched as the lotus vines furiously extended toward him, about to climb up his body and crazily absorb his will of Tao. Lin Xian was both surprised and delighted. How could this be? He made all the lotuses in the heavenly lake bloom. This was something that no one had ever done before. Did exalted Zi Hua show up? Did he show up for him? Everyone was shocked, including Qin Xiaohe and Su Qian. Their eyes were as round as saucers. However, when Xiao Han and Wu Kei turned around and saw the figure walking out from behind Lin Xian, they felt relieved. The lotuses in the heavenly lake bloomed at the same time. It had nothing to do with Lin Xian. Rustle, rustle, rustle. Right at this moment, the cultivators from various realms discovered that the strongest flower, the Flower Emperor, was also moving. Its petals opened up one by one, and a little girl's tender face appeared in the center of the flower. She looked in Lin Xian's direction and let out a tinkling laughter. Boom! This scene caused everyone's heads to shake violently and their hearts to beat wildly. The Flower Emperor bloomed. It bloomed for the descendant of the Lin clan, Lin Xian. This was impossible, this. Qin Xiaohe's eyes were filled with disbelief and even fear. The Flower Emperor was planted by exalted Zi Hua and had been with him for 10,000 years. It was equivalent to the daughter of exalted Zi Hua. Even Suzerain Hai of Kunlun didn't have such an honor. At this moment, the Heaven Lake Divine Land was in complete silence. Only the rustling of the lotuses and the sound of the water flowing could be heard. The Flower Emperor's innocent and romantic laughter could be heard. In fact, the scene was far more than that. The child's face in the center of the Flower Emperor seemed to want to come out and turn into a human, throwing herself into Lin Xian's arms. At this moment, Lin Xian was wild with joy. His emotions were surging violently. Even though he was the descendant of the Lin family and had a superior status since birth, he couldn't control the impulse in his heart. He wanted to go crazy and howl to the sky. The Flower Emperor bloomed for him. The heavenly lake bloomed at the same time. What did this mean? It meant that he was the successor of exalted sent by heaven. He would rule the Kunlun Sea and control the heavenly Tao of Kunlun. He would become the one and only god of Kunlun. How could the small Lin family compare to the entire Kunlun? In the future, he might even become the second person after Divine Lord Tianyong. The more Lin Xian thought about it, the more excited he became. He started to imagine all kinds of scenes in his mind. He was surrounded by the fairies of Kunlun, received the worship of Suzerain Hai of Kunlun, and the three divine Tao worlds bowed down to him. He almost couldn't control his ecstasy. Whoosh! Abruptly, at this moment, the thick fragrance of the flowers disappeared. All the lotuses in the heavenly lake closed. The face of the child in the middle of the 10,000 flowers let out a dissatisfied scolding before returning to the heart of the flower. After that, the gigantic petals closed and everything returned to normal. Let's go. Qin Hao dispersed the aura of the perfect sky wheel and walked past Lin Xian. He said to Xiao Han and Wuk, "Okay." The two nodded. The group left the heavenly lake and walked towards the depths of the Kunlun Sea. Lin Xian looked at the silent corridor of the heavenly lake and felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured on his heart. It was so cold that it felt like a dream. Chapter 1984. Lin Xian was in an extremely bad mood. It was as if he had fallen from the clouds into a quagmire. A moment ago, he was dazzling in the sea of flowers, surrounded by celestial lotuses, and the Flower Emperor bloomed for him. He thought he was the chosen one, the successor of exalted Zi Hua sent by the heavens. In the next second, the heavenly lake was dead silent. It was as if he had been abandoned. Apart from the dozens of celestial lotuses around him, all the other lotuses closed as if the Flower Emperor had never bloomed. An indescribable sense of loss filled Lin Xian's heart. As a descendant of a noble divine path family, it was hard for him to bear such a blow. If the people accompanying him didn't push him, he would have broken down. How could this be? Lin Xian said sadly. The other Lin family cultivators didn't dare to say anything. Maybe the Heavenly Lake's 10,000 lotuses and the Flower Emperor didn't move because of young Master Lin. Supreme God Gui Tu said. This was the only explanation. After all, there were many cultivators from different realms here. Someone might have secretly released their Tao intent and made Lin Xian think that the Sea of Flowers moved because of him. Who is it? Lin Xian glanced at everyone with a sharp gaze. There was no one beside him just now. However, all the celestial lotuses in the Heavenly Lake bloomed in his direction. If it wasn't him, who else could it be? Young Master. Lin Rue secretly pointed at the figures in front of him. Li Chuji happened to pass by here just now. Could it be him? Impossible. Lin Xian clenched his teeth and denied it. Although he didn't admit it, a thought appeared in his mind. The strange movement in the Heavenly Lake might have something to do with Li Chuji. The more he thought about it, the stronger this thought became. At this moment, Lin Xian's expression was very ugly. Looking at Qin Hao's back, he wondered if this person was really related to the martial god of the sword world. Was he the martial god's disciple? A few months ago, Lin Xian was just guessing. At that time, he was just cooperating with the Kunlun Sea. Now, it seemed that Li Chuji wasn't simple at all. Otherwise, how could he make the Flower Emperor bloom? If he really did do it, his talent was too terrifying. Lin Xian didn't want to continue thinking about it. No matter what the truth was, he had already lost a big chance to become the successor of Exalted Zihua. And this chance might be taken away by Li Chuji. At the thought of this, Lin Xian's aura became extremely cold, and the murderous intent in his eyes grew increasingly intense. The heavenly path of Kunlun would never be taken away by others, especially those from the outside world. He had to eliminate Qin Hao before he was recognized by the Kunlun Sea. Let's go. Lin Xian called out and led the group away from the Heavenly Lake. Junior sister, what do you think? Su Qian said as she looked at Qin Xiaohe. The Flower Emperor didn't open it because of Lin Xian. There must be other reasons. Qin Xiaohe was deep in thought as she recalled the scene from before. At that time, a figure passed by Lin Xian. Immediately after, the Flower Emperor closed and the lotuses retracted. The Heavenly Lake was filled with a sorrowful aura, as if it had been abandoned by a heartless person. Could it be him? Li Chuji. Qin Xiaohe looked in the direction that Qin Hao had left. In the battle in the city, Li Chuji's performance was extremely outstanding. With his third-level Nirvana Law cultivation, he activated the divine artifact and killed many of the Lin clan's emperors. No one could withstand his sword. Not only was his swordsmanship extraordinary, but his methods were also extremely ruthless. He killed with one strike and did not care about the Lin clan's status in Kunlun at all. He even cooperated with a minor celestial wheel realm cultivator to kill Kunlun's Qing Zun. From this, it could be seen that Li Chuji's talent was unquestionable. Could it be that he had triggered the phenomenon in the Heavenly Lake, causing the lotuses to open at the same time and the Flower Emperor to bloom? Qin Xiaohe was not sure. If that was the case, why would Li Chuji hide the truth and make a move secretly? Did he deliberately make things difficult for Lin Xian just for revenge? Let's follow them and take a look. Su Qian also seemed to have noticed something and was interested. She and Qin Xiaohe followed in the direction that Qin Hao and the others had left. This year's event seemed to be very different from the previous ones. Did you do something just now? Qin Hao and the others crossed the Heavenly Lake and walked forward. Huan Zun smiled and said. Although he had guessed the result, he still wanted to hear Qin Hao admit it himself. Yes. Qin Hao nodded and secretly operated the celestial wheel to release the tranquil water, which caused the lotuses to open at the same time and the Flower Emperor to bloom. Why don't you show it and let Fairy He and Fairy Sue witness it? Wuck said. In this way, they would have enough weight to be summoned by Kunlun's clan leader. It's true that there is a trace of Kunlun's will in the Heavenly Lake, but it's not enough to control Kunlun's heavenly Tao. Instead of attracting attention and setting up many competitors, it's better to take a good look at the opportunities in Kunlun's sea. Qin Hao smiled. Kunlun's heavenly Tao did not have much connection with the Heavenly Lake. You're quite shrewd. Huan Zun chuckled. Qin Hao shook his head helplessly. How could he not hide when he was traveling? Not only him, but the overlords of various realms were also hiding their trump cards. Kunlun's wonderland was endless. There were many wonderland islands scattered everywhere. Some were floating islands and some were on the sea. It was very beautiful. Every island here emitted a different aura, containing a unique divine path opportunity, left behind by different extraordinary figures. Back then, Zihua Supreme was also a giant with a quasi-divine lord cultivation. He opened up this Kunlun sea. Exalted Zihua was proficient in the Tao of alchemy. He could help Nirvana forge the heavenly wheel and replenish the Tao intent and godly power that the heavenly wheel lacked. When the exalted Zihua was alive, countless cultivators came to ask for godly elixirs. So, not all of the divine path opportunities in this Kunlun's wonderland were left by Zihua Mountain. Most of them were left by the top overlords who asked for medicine in exchange for divine pills. These divine path opportunities were left behind for the Kunlun's brother Hai to cultivate. It was an equivalent exchange. Look over there. Wuck pointed in a direction. Everyone looked over and saw that the sky was falling and the earth was cracking. Waves of fire rushed into the sky, and a volcanic island was spewing lava. The scene was extremely terrifying. In the lava spewing into the sky, there was an illusory divine phoenix circling and crying. It was bathed in the divine fire of the Great Path, as if it was going to be reborn in the fire. The sharp cry it let out was frightening. At this time, many groups of overlords were heading toward the lava divine mountain. They stood at the edge of the mountain and watched the divine phoenix circling in the flames as if waiting for something. The spirit of the phoenix. Qin Hao looked at all of this and his heart trembled. On the celestial mountain, lava was rolling, and the divine fire was eternal. A peerless master had left behind the divine will of the celestial wheel. The illusory phoenix bathed in the divine fire was the condensation of the master's divine will. Even though they were far away from the celestial mountain, Qin Hao could feel the horror of the spewing divine fire. The destructive power was terrifying. Even the red lotus divine fire could not resist it. The divine fire of the phoenix, the real divine fire of the phoenix. The phoenix spirit is summoning me. Kuang Tang's eyes instantly became bloodshot, and he flew toward the celestial mountain uncontrollably. He wanted to throw himself into the divine fire. Illusion Elder, stop him. Qin Hao could not help but be shocked. If Kuang Tang threw himself into the divine fire, he would definitely die. When the Illusion Elder saw this, his figure flashed and flew out. In the next moment, he stood firmly in front of Kuang Tang, not allowing him to get close. Get out of the way! Kuang Tang shouted at the Illusion Elder. The phoenix spirit in the divine fire was summoning him, and he would transform because of it. Tang, calm down. Qin Hao chased over and took out the blood pistol pill. Not allowing Kuang Tang to resist, Wuck covered his mouth, and Qin Hao stuffed the entire bottle of pills into Kuang Tang's mouth. Gulp. As the pills entered his stomach, the aura of the phoenix tree flower calmed Kuang Tang's emotions a little. The blood in his eyes gradually faded. I can't control myself. The phoenix spirit land is indeed summoning me. Kuang Tang said apologetically. The divine fire of the celestial mountain is the divine fire of Tianlun. Even old man would find it hard to resist. Don't be impulsive, the Illusion Elder warned sternly. But, Kwang Tang pointed at the phoenix spirit bathed in the divine fire. His eyes were filled with desire. He was not being impulsive, but he really felt it. Listen to me, the divine flame of the celestial mountain is not ordinary. It was set up by a great celestial wheel expert, so you can't take it by force. Take a look. Qin Hao pointed at the celestial mountain. At this moment, someone had already made a move on the celestial phoenix. Kwang Tang turned his head and saw a fiery explosion. All the cultivators who were close to the celestial mountain and wanted to break through to the divine flame were sent flying while vomiting blood. Their clothes were torn apart, and there were even some who screamed as they were burned to death by the divine flame. Sister! Kwang Tang cried like a child. Junior brother, help Kwang Tang seize the phoenix spirit. I also feel that Kwang Tang will transform. Muri transmitted her voice. When Kwang Tang was born, she had already left the Phoenix clan. Kwang Tang was the younger brother of the Phoenix clan ancestor, so it was fine for him to call her sister. Moreover, Kwang Tang's innate spiritual sense was incomplete. It was quite distressing. All right. Qin Hao nodded. He looked at the fiery light on the celestial mountain. No matter how difficult it was, he had to follow his senior sister's orders. He said to Kwang Tang, I will help you break the divine fire barrier. No matter what happens next, you have to rely on yourself. Do you understand? The great Tianluan expert with fire divine force was paying attention. Breaking the barrier was already the limit of Qin Hao's ability. He could not protect Kwang Tang anymore. After all, Kwang Tang would die if he was tainted by the phoenix spirit's fire qi. This was not the divine wilderness continent. The divine fire of the celestial mountain contained powerful divine force. If Kwang Tang was burned to death, Qin Hao would not be able to use the power of the heavenly path to find his soul. Even if he controlled the will of the Kunlun continent, he would not be able to find him. Let him go. Muri seemed to be very confident in Kwang Tang. Okay. Kwang Tang nodded heavily. He would be responsible for any consequences. As you wish, senior sister. Qin Hao said. You must be careful. Xiaohan said. Her tone was a little nervous. The divine path's opportunity that Zihua had allowed to be left behind was not to be underestimated. The group moved closer to the celestial mountain. A large number of fire cultivators had gathered here. Chapter 1985. Outside the divine fire on the celestial mountain, a large number of experts attacked the barrier, trying to seize the divine will of the phoenix spirit. Even though many people failed, they still refused to give up. In an instant, the roar of Tao techniques on this celestial mountain was endless. At this moment, Qin Hao was standing in the air in front of the barrier. Facing the burning barrier, his skin felt a faint pain. The Tianluan in his body operated, and a strand of divine consciousness went into the fire to feel the strength of the divine fire. Immediately, a fierce burning force came and went straight into his soul. Visible to the naked eye, his clothes were surrounded by a layer of flame particles, as if it was going to burn him on the spot. Qin Hao let out a muffled groan. His body trembled, and sweat seeped out of his forehead. His face was slightly pale. What a powerful fire! Although the senior who left behind the phoenix spirit didn't have the best Tianluan, his flame power was extremely shocking. Qin Hao felt a little and was almost injured. No wonder others couldn't break the barrier. Even a small Tianluan couldn't withstand the power of the divine fire. Birds of a feather flocked together. As expected, those who dared to step into the Kunlun Sea and ask for medicine from Supreme Zihua weren't simple. Kid, are you okay? Illusion Elder stepped forward and asked. Seeing Qin Hao's situation, he was a little worried. The fire was so strong that even a perfect Tianluan couldn't withstand it. I'm fine, Qin Hao said softly and stared ahead. The senior who left the Phoenix spirit was indeed extraordinary. It seemed that the barrier wasn't simple either. He couldn't attack from the surface. Thinking of this, Qin Hao's eyes gradually became demonic. Lines appeared on his eyes, and his gaze penetrated the divine fire. It was as if he could see the trajectory of the opponent's divine will. Everything gradually became clear. I see. The divine power flowing on the barrier wasn't an ordinary barrier. It was enhanced by divine power. Don't be too serious. The expert's methods are brilliant. Didn't you see that so many experts failed? You're just a Nirvana realm cultivator with 3 layers of laws. If you're too greedy, you might lose your life. Someone in the distance said. Seeing Qin Hao seriously staring at the divine fire, he reminded him to give up when it was time. The divine will of the Phoenix spirit wasn't something Qin Hao was qualified to obtain. Thank you for your kindness. I know what I'm doing. Qin Hao looked over and replied, That's right. Seeing this, the person sneered and ignored him. Qin Hao took a deep breath and returned to the state he was in just now. His divine consciousness reached out to the barrier in front of him and melted into the divine fire. It converged with the divine will of the cultivator. This time, an image was reflected in his eyes. The barrier seemed to have come alive. Countless ancient characters were floating in the flames. Each character was shining with the divine light of the great path. They resonated with each other and emitted a terrifying divine power that filled the barrier. When Qin Hao's divine consciousness tried to merge into a rune, in an instant, a raging radiance of flames rushed out from the rune. It was as if a fist had come crashing down, shaking Qin Hao's spiritual soul. The crackling and crackling of the flames on the barrier was incomparably intense. It was as if it was going to burn all the heavens. It actually caused a chain reaction. All the runes began to burst forth with the divine flames of the great path. A blurry figure appeared in the flames. The figure threw out punch after punch, unleashing a monstrous fist might. Every punch seemed to have landed on Qin Hao's body. Fist technique. Qin Hao saw it clearly. The divine will that filled the barrier was a set of divine flame fist technique. The figure was as valiant as the god of fire. Every punch carried a terrifying explosive force. Buzz. Divine light fell on Qin Hao. It was dazzling. The great void sword hummed and floated beside him. The two resonated. The light of the sword kept flowing to Qin Hao. It wrapped around his body and made him emit a majestic divine will. It was as if he was borrowing the power of the divine implement. Look over there. Many people noticed the commotion. They pointed at Qin Hao, who was surrounded by the sword light. This silver-haired youth was borrowing the power of the divine implement. What was he doing? Could it be that he wanted to split the divine fire of the celestial mountain? Was he not afraid of being burned by the divine fire? Qin Hao smiled faintly. In order not to expose his cultivation, he had to create an illusion to confuse these cultivators. Then, Qin Hao pointed with his sword finger. The divine light of the great void sword soared into the sky. The blood-red flame gradually covered the sky, making him emit the might of precepts. He pointed forward. Slash! There was a boom. The great void sword exploded with sword chi that was hundreds of meters long. It fell diagonally with the billowing blood flame. It slashed on the celestial mountain and made a loud noise with the enchantment. Although this sword shook the enchantment and made the flames tumble, it did not cut it open as expected. What a powerful sword chi! A mere holiness of Nirvana cultivator actually used this sword to unleash the attack power of a heavenly wheel cultivator. Many onlookers were shocked. Qin Hao frowned. He activated the Red Lotus divine power with a perfect heavenly wheel and integrated it into this sword. It could not shake the divine fire enchantment. It seemed that there was only one way. Qin Hao slowly closed his eyes and released his aura. The power of the original realm intersected with this world, trying to communicate with the heavenly path of Kunlun. There were many heavenly wheel realm cultivators participating in the Kunlun Sea meeting. Just near the celestial mountain, there were no less than 5 or 6 people. They all released their heavenly wheel realm power, wanting to join the fight. Everyone, let's just wait quietly. Qin Hao dispersed his aura and cut off the fusion with the heavenly path of Kunlun. The heavenly path of the falling celestial mountain disappeared. In the next moment, the weakened mountain fire soared under the support of the divine technique. The collapsed enchantment automatically reformed, and the path of the sword that led to the inside also closed. Countless cultivators watched and sighed. In this way, no one could break the divine fire, and no one could compete with crazed Tang for the will of the heavenly path. Hearing the loud cries of the phoenix coming from inside the celestial mountain, the cultivators who were ready to make a move were annoyed. However, they didn't leave, but stood guard outside. Even if someone broke into the divine fire enchantment, they might not be able to refine the will of the heavenly path. Refining it was fine, as they could still extract the will of the heavenly path from Tang. After all, there were many heavenly wheel realm cultivators here, and some of them could do it. Although it would cause great harm to Tang, it wasn't important to them. Qin Hao looked at the surrounding cultivators and felt a strong threat from them. However, he didn't care. He had the ability to split the divine fire, and he could also use it to burn those who had bad intentions. Even if a few more heavenly wheel realm cultivators came, it would be useless if their cultivation wasn't as strong as the senior who set the divine fire. Next, success or failure will depend on your luck. Qin Hao looked at the raging flames on the celestial mountain. His only worry was whether crazed Tang could withstand the phoenix spirit. He had done what he needed to do. The rest depended on crazed Tang. At this moment, Qin Hao's fiery eyes flickered. His divine consciousness entered the flames and continued to comprehend the divine flame fist technique. The senior who created this fist technique was extremely talented. He used the explosive characteristics of the flame divine power in an ingenious manner. Cultivating this fist technique was also a kind of improvement for Qin Hao. In the process of comprehending, the figure appeared in Qin Hao's eyes again. He punched out, and the pressure was transmitted back to his senses. It was as if it had entered his soul. He carefully memorized every detail and every movement. Qin Hao found that the specialty of this fist technique was to explode from the inside out. When the divine power hit the opponent's divine technique or even the body, it would suddenly explode. It was similar to the 7-injuring fist of Xiaoguo's father, Qi Daxiong. They both broke the defense from the inside.